Just
All right.
every single.
Welcome to the Portsmouth School Board meeting for February 11th, 2025. Patty, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Liz Barrett. Here. Tish Campbell. Nancy Clayberg. Pip Clues. Here. Brian French.
Here.
Lee Hudson. Byron Matto.
Here.
Carrie Nolte. Here. Lisa Rappaport. Eric Moore.
Here.
Nathan Delaney.
Here.
All right, if you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'd like to take a motion to accept all the minutes on the consent agenda.
I'd like to request that we separate the 30th from the other two.
Sounds good. Somebody can make that motion.
Motion to accept the December 10th and December 28th meeting minutes.
All those in favor? That's everybody here. All right, and then take a motion for the January 30th ones, then we can have a discussion.
Move to accept January 30 minutes.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Pip?
I didn't have anything to discuss. I just wasn't present, so I wanted to
Oh,
abstain
okay,
from that.
got it.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstaining? There we go.
Just say announcements of recognitions, just above.
Oh, I missed that one. Announcements and recognitions.
So a quick announcement just at the top on a technical issue that we're having this evening. So if you are, if you're viewing us through the live YouTube feed, to come on via the Zoom link that is at the top of the agenda, we're notified of a problem just before the meeting where folks, if they click on the link that is on the top of the agenda, that they are not, they're running into a dead end. But if they copy and paste that link into their browser, then they're able to join the meeting. So we've tried a couple things to try to diagnose what it is. We haven't been able to kind of take care of it. But so for this evening, if you're someone at home, or you have someone who's texting you at home saying, hey, I'm having a hard time getting into this meeting, what you need to do is go to the agenda, which is linked online in the city website. There is a link to the Zoom meeting if you wanted to view from home and join us from home. You would copy that link and then paste it into your browser and then hit enter, and that would allow you to get into the meeting. So again, this is something we'll work on. We're not exactly sure. We haven't done anything different than we've done in the past, and we were given a heads up just before the meeting this was an issue, and we've been working on it. One of our board members who is not here yet is now going to come in to join us because we haven't been able to even get the panelists setting to work. So just a heads up for people at home. We still are recording the meeting and will still be available online after the fact. So, yeah, Liz.
Could we move the public comment to give opportunity for folks to come in online in case they wanted to public comment? I don't know if I would need a motion to have a additional public comment. Just
Want to suspend the rules?
motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
I think we need a 2/3 vote right there.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify what the...
I'm just wanting to move public comment to give opportunity for people that come online that maybe did want to public comment to be able to tune in and then
So maybe we
offer
can
that
move it.
opportunity later on in the meeting.
So currently, typically in our agenda, there's the only remote opportunity for public comment is on the front end of the agenda and not the second public comment opportunity at the end of the agenda. So if I'm hearing this right, we would suspend the rules to allow a second online public comment opportunity at the end of the meeting.
Yes, I think that would be the best way to do it because I wonder if there's folks in the audience that may be wanting to public comment now so that they can leave afterwards to not hold them up either, to allow for public comment at the end of the meeting as well.
So was that official motion and official second on that? Okay. All those in favor of that? All right. And no opposed, so. All right, so
A couple more, if it's all right. Just wanted to congratulate the boys alpine ski team who won the Division I state championship at Pat's Peak. The girls were up competing today. I don't know what the outcome of that is. Just with the boys team, this is the second consecutive year for the boys. There are 18 teams in the field, and the coach is one of our teachers at the high school, Kyle Harrison. So congratulations to all of them. My understanding, I saw some of them today, and they're getting ready to be, it sounds like they were going to be introduced at the middle of the high school varsity game tonight to receive, applause and stuff from the audience. And some of them were giving Cause a hard time because last year they got introduced in the middle of the JV game, which Cause is like, it's not my fault. You guys wanted to go home and you were sleepy and you just got off the mountain. But anyways, congratulations to all the students and the coach on that. Redistricting, I just wanted to, we don't have a full thing here, but I want to make sure the public was aware that we are moving ahead with implementation of redistricting. Today, a couple of different things got wrapped up over the weekend. Thanks to our team, Patty did a ton of work this weekend to have us ready. Where we flipped over the website. If you go to the page now, instead of redistricting committee, you'll see a link for elementary redistricting, which takes you to a new page that is still, will become more robust as we go, but it already has some good stuff for people. A paper letter is going out to all the identified families in transition neighborhoods. It went out today.
Today, yep.
And that letter gives folks, directs them to the website for additional information, lets them know that there'll be an open house for parents of transition families who are trying to kind of make decisions about things on March 18th at Little Harbor School in the evening, and then that we're asking folks to notify us of a decision by April 3rd.
April 3rd, yeah.
So we're continuing to work. That is a snail mail that has gone out today, but we'll be notifying the entire district of that. Is it Friday or Monday? Monday?
I think it's
we're
Monday, yeah.
So on
Yep.
Monday next week, there'll be a digital blast to everybody in the district, so everybody kind of has an idea. That also put us in a situation, just in case we've missed somebody, that there'll be another opportunity to catch folks that way. But snail mail went out today to all the families that we've identified. Also, just wanted to say that this weekend is the middle school musical, Singing in the Rain. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are opportunities to see the middle school musical. And I'm hoping at some point Nathan will give us some more information. But Nathan, I just wanted to say, Nathan led a trip for administrators, teachers, and students, student leaders up to Hanover High School for us to visit with them and really explore some really neat kind of structural elements of the way they set up their school, so students have more of a voice in how the school is run, and both in terms of kind of procedure, handbooks, discipline, a variety of different things, where the folks at Hanover are doing some really interesting things. And we had a great trip, and that's all about kind of Nathan and the work Nathan's done, which is awesome to connect the two places. So I hope at some point you'll put together something for these guys to talk through some of what we ran into while we were up there. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Great. All right, thank you. We'll move on to public comment. You have 3 minutes. Looks like we got Kate. If you can state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Let's see this thing. Let's see.
Hello, Kate Hayden, One Ash Street, Portsmouth. I just want to say I'm so glad to see Ken here tonight. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say about the elementary school playground projects and the facilities and grounds report. I had a little time to look at it earlier today and had a few questions that I want to put out there, so hopefully during his presentation he can answer them. First, on the time frame slide, there wasn't really any specific dates for the action steps. So I'm hoping that he can provide some information about when the various tasks necessary for the project will occur. And I know it had the dates for when the school board would be able to access the funds from the city. But I'm hoping to get a status update on what's being done now in regards to the project, what the next steps are, and when we can expect construction to begin at the various sites. I also thought that the city approved $600,000 per year, $500,000 bonded and $100K from the general fund. So just hoping to get clarification on the amount allotted for the project. On the slide that I saw, it had a total of $1.6 million, and it was my understanding that it was a total of $1.8 million. So I'm just hoping to get clarification from you guys on the specifics of that. And finally, so that the playgrounds don't fall through the cracks again, I believe there should be a budget line item for them. I'm hoping there could be a discussion about this, and perhaps Ken can share his expertise on why or why not that's a good idea. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you. I look forward to hearing the responses.
All right, thanks, Kate. Anybody else for public comment? Did anybody manage to get into Zoom?
We have people on Zoom, but nobody has their hand up, so.
All right, and we're
Kudos
going
to the people who
we'll
did
do
it.
Zoom after anyways.
Okay.
The final thing. So, all right, I'll close public comment. All right, on to the workshop session 2 for the FY26 budget.
We have Ken Lynchy tonight, our Director of Facilities and Grounds. This is part of our FY26 budget development, where we're going to bring certain department heads in front. Obviously, last week you saw Tom Lotz about information technology. Facilities and Grounds is a large part of our budget, and Ken has a very pretty lengthy presentation, very in-depth, so I would ask that the questions, if you could hold them till the end. Reason being is I'm willing to bet that at least a couple of the questions will probably be answered in his presentation. So,
Could you just start and tell us what sections of the budget we might be hitting?
facilities.
So in the operating, good evening, Ken Lynchy, Director of Building Grounds. The operating budget for facilities is 187, 188, and 189. 187 is the athletic fields, 188 is the operation for the buildings, and 189 is the energy.
Thank you.
So I'm going to run through, I'm going to summarize the slides. I have a lot of information because there's a lot of things that we will touch base on throughout my operations. Patty, if you want to hit the slide. Quick overview of the operations of our staff. What you don't see here is what I've noticed in the last few weeks, and when we had such a changeover. Out of our 21 custodians, 14 of them are brand new within the last 10 months. That's how much of a changeover we've had in the custodial field in the last year. And I want to put kudos out to some Little Harbor teachers, Little Harbor paras, middle school para, Dondero para, and some high school students who stepped up this past summer, and we hired them as summer help to help us get through that labor shortage so we can get through and get the buildings clean this summer as well. Next slide, please. This slide here gives you a kind of summary of what the department does. We're responsible through multiple projects, whether it's construction to HVAC. The facility department also oversees all the athletic programs, fields, not only at the high school, but also at various sites of Cloud Field, Little Harbor School, Dondero as well. Next slide. This gives you a summary of sustainability. We talk about recycling. We've been composting for years now. What it's allowed us to do is reduce 24 yards of trash from the landfill. The elementary schools dumpsters only used once a week. High school have been able to reduce it to 3 days a week, and the middle school down to 2 days a week. So there's been some great increases with the recycling and composting as well. You also see there's solar panels. We have them at the high school. I'll get further depth in the next slide when we talk about solar panels, especially for the high school. But we have solar panels at almost all the schools, mainly for educational purposes, so they can look at trends, what we're generating, what we're not. They can do, I know the middle school kids do a lot trending with all our solar panels and access to each one of them as well. Next slide, please. This is a slide that shows this is the high school system. This was installed in 2016. It's part of a purchase agreement through the state contract we did with Merrimack Schools. They dropped out, we slid in and took it. We also have solar panels sitting at Madbury Water Plant. It's a two-part project. Peter Rice oversees that one, and we oversee this one here at the high school. What this slide shows you is what we've generated to date. About a week and a half ago, this slide is where the information comes. You'll see for the methane, the gas, the gigabytes, and we can look at this at different trends, different layouts, and depending on where we're generating it. And when you go to the next slide, this actually shows you what we're generating per month in kilowatt hours, and based off that, we should be right around 202.9 million, give or take, kilowatt hours that's been generated since 2016. Now, as part of that PPA agreement, we don't see the cost benefit yet in that cost savings, because that's what pays the contract of that. Talking with Peter Rice about a month ago, we are now going to start exploring our options of purchasing out that agreement based off 10 years as that is part of their agreement. And come 10 years, then we can look at purchasing that out and then take the solar benefits to us. Roughly, it's probably about $30,000 to $35,000 a year is what we're generating in savings. In comparison to that, would probably be a month's worth of AC in the summer, or maybe a month or so of heating costs, if you want to compare electricity of what is being spent out based on it district-wide as well. Next slide, please. When we look at energy as well, not only with solar, we like to do trends. I like to see where we are based off with market costs, like we see where we're usage. This is a 3-year trend for use. What you'll see in this one here is, I thought this was a pointer. Yeah, there you go. Right here in July, you'll see in 2004 that you'll see there's a bump. We believe that is because now we have high school 75% AC, the middle school is 100% AC, and New Franklin School is 100% AC. So we're seeing that increase just for the July month based off the air conditioning usage, because we do spread out our programs throughout the summer to accommodate where the need is based off elementary and middle school, but also to help alleviate where we can still do the facility work, so not one school is overcome by all the programs. Next slide. And then this is also natural gas trend. You'll see that July and summer, there's really nothing. It's just maintaining kitchens, certain things like that, and then you'll see how we trend up. We look at these quite a bit. We want to see, there's not a different spike. We like to track weather a little bit, just so we can make sure that we have, consistency from years. We know cost and usage is going to change, but we still want to see that consistency of the trend and that circular. And if we do get in a bump, then we want to go back and figure out why. Where did we increase, and what was the increase? Because budgets can't take that instant spike all the time. So we try to use these as guidance. Security timeline. We've been doing a lot of work security-wise. I wanted to give a summary, and it's going to be a couple pages, to talk about where we are district-wide. We've done a lot of cameras. We've done a lot of access control. This kind of gives the timeline of where we started back in the high school system in 2002. But it gives you how each year, every couple of years, there's always something going on within security, whether it's at an elementary school, whether it's at the high school, at the middle school. It also falls into grants. We've been very fortunate that we've seen 3 rounds of grants, including some ESSER funding as well, where if you do some calculation on that, we should be right around about $950,000 of free money that we received over the last 10 to 15 years in grant funding to upgrade cameras, to add access control, and then to increase the load of the cameras and accessibility, where in the elementary schools, you can watch most of the hallways. We're still working on a couple other spots. Or the high school, you can watch the individual walk around the entire building. Access certain points where teachers can get in certain parts of the building during the day, before and after hours of school. So we continue to look at that. It also talks about when we do the renovations. You look at New Franklin Middle School in Dondero. They're all little pieces here and there, and you can go to the next slide as well, because it continues. It just shows where we start looking at infrastructures, we look at little pieces here. There's a lot of little parts of each school that we constantly look at. We're constantly trying to upgrade. There's always a need, there's always a want. It's just how do we fulfill that within the cost of the operating budget, or we look into a grant. The ongoing work is, hardware upgrades, cameras, panic buttons, security entrances. How do we create a man trap where individuals can't get into the school? There's talk about film, look at it, security filming. Right now, there's rumors there's another round 4 coming out. So right now, we're working with Homeland Security, doing another assessment of all our schools on where we were, where we are, and giving us recommendations on how to proceed. So when that fourth round comes out, then we can be prepared to apply for a slew of things. Because each school will get a certain piece of that funding. It's just a matter of what are they going to give us. So we try to give them a broad range of projects so that we can make sure that every school gets something based off their needs or their wants. During the redistricting, there was a lot of comments to talk about elementary schools. So I thought I'd do a couple slides to talk about the elementary renovation and timelines. When we look at the scale here, we started back in 2002 with New Franklin as an addition on, and I'm not sure if that was part of a redistricting or if that was just because the school was in size of just growth. However, you can see in 2002 we started putting funding. Don Dare was same as well. And then we really got into depth just before 2011. And Tom Martin, a former school board member, and I used to talk a lot as where can we get sustainability in the schools? How do we bring energy efficiency into the schools? And this is where we came up with the Doran Wittery report study. So it kind of gives a guideline of where we are with the schools, where do we go, what's the cost, high-end renovations, low cost, things like that. And so then we started into, as we worked into that, City Hall was renovated in order to help the growth at Little Harbor, and that's where we put kindergarten. When we looked into that, then we said, okay, now we know where the study is. We looked into the energy feasibility study, and this is where we hired the company and started looking at energy, used New Franklin as the model, and then that model grew into renovations with Little Harbor, Don Darrow, and then as you see in the bottom, we've started into New Franklin, and we will continue into New Franklin. Next slide, please. Also, as part of this redistricting comment, when there's tours, looks at, at New Franklin, it's where is the funds and how are we funding that? And construction side and renovation side and facility side, I give a full timeline of events of how much work we have done at New Franklin School. So even though sometimes it does look like an older school, we've put a significant amount of money into that school over the years, whether it's mechanical to electrical, AC. One of the biggest pluses for that school is just before COVID, we were doing a mechanical upgrade, and that school is 100% fresh air. So even if it's 2 degrees outside, it's still designed to bring in 100% fresh air based off, the days of HVAC of allowing. So COVID was not an issue with that school. The other schools, we really had to tweak the systems in order to bring as much fresh air in as we can. But this system worked well for us, and then we're starting to now look at and branch out onto other schools. And then you look into the other places, there's windows coming up. We've done some work. We're looking to do some more roof work this summer. We've done a lot of window repairs. And then on the bottom where the page 12.9 is kind of hiding, it talks about the next phases of the $3 million and $2 million, which we're also working on to see if is that a true number and where do we need to adjust, based off today's cost in construction versus what cost of construction was 10 years ago. Playgrounds, as are my friends in the back here. So I give a quick history on playgrounds as part of the PEP 2000. Nancy was a big stakeholder in that. Then we looked into, PEEP was coming out from community campus to Don Darrow, and then they went from Don Darrow to Little Harbor, so there was their playground. But it kind of gives you a list of what we've been doing for repairs, relocating, some nature play replacement at Don Darrow, Little Harbor's PTA work, and then there's a couple pieces at New Franklin that we're looking to replace now. I'm just waiting for the ground to thaw out so we can stick them in. But until that, those are still unfortunately sitting on the loading dock. So we get into the playground timeline. Playgrounds have aged. We know they need to be replaced. There's been some great work done by the PT at Little Harbor that we're going to take and move forward. As you look at the funding here, it's 600, 500, and 500. The first year is $500,000 allotted for Little Harbor for the replacement of their playground, with $100,000 to allow us to move forward and get an RFP. In order to move out with the RFP, we need to have the funding. So that funding is technically right now is becoming available when the budget passes, which would be sometime in June-ish, when the city council will approve the budget as a whole. Before that, we will put the RFP out to bid. Probably put it out sometime in May. There's some work that we can do to get it moving, knowing that the stipulations in the contract can't move forward until the funding's available. So we can put verbiage in that and get that to move forward. Once we move that, then the progress will start. It'll work with the company of engineering design. We'll use the conceptual drawing that Little Harbor has put in place. There is some tweaks to it based off a couple of comments from staff, which is fine. But we also have to create PEEP, which is the early education program on the other side. I can't submit permits to the state until I have both plans in place and understand what ground disruption is going to be happening. I also have to have a drainage plan of the pavement even though we're moving away from the water line and we're pulling the playground out. I'm still having new pavement. I still have drainage issues. So I have to talk about how we're going to de-energize that drainage into a swale, into a catch basin, into some type of stone base, because they're not going to want us to drain that water right off and run it right out into a wet one, because then we wash it out. It's the same way we did with the tennis courts. Based off our pavement layout, we then created a drainage that would de-energize the energy of the water during a monsoon rain, or percentage of how many inches per hour. That's a lot of work, and that's going to take some time. We have some contacts from the Little Harbor PTA that's given to us that we'll give forward to our engineering or consultant team that we look forward to. But that'll take some time. With that being said, then once we finalize that, then things will go out to bid. So it's gonna go out to bid somewhere, not guarantee the dates, but it's gonna be sometime right about now or just somewhere around last month. So that's where we can hit the timing of the manufacturing, the equipment, scheduling, school gets out, we break ground, we do a playground. That's still a year out. Not this coming summer, it's the following summer. That's where that will come in. I can't give specific dates and times yet until we have the RP out and back in the farm, then we'll have more of a timeline. Then we can get something more secure. They'll also talk about some meetings with staff and parents and inputs, and just to kind of finalize that. As that ball is just about rolling and move, they will shift into New Franklin School, because their funding will be coming available that summer after. And as their ball gets ready to start rolling for construction and layout, then we'll shift into Dondero as well and wrap up with Dondero. So there is a lot of work once we hit this late spring until now to complete for Little Harbor School. So that's kind of that in a nutshell of how we will proceed forward. Also part of your package, you have the city side capital, which talks about most of these projects here, whether it's paving, elementary playground, roof replacement, security upgrades. We're looking to do some interior upgrades pretty soon. And also we put a piece in here for the CTE renovation. Also, what I put in the second slide, if you will see in the last couple pictures, is the high school gymnasium lighting. We just did a full upgrade of the interior lighting to a new LED type system. We're probably the first high school to have this in the region area. UNH just installed the same thing. Phillips Exeter Academy is where we saw this model. To be honest, it's taken me 10 years to find a light for this gymnasium that I felt confident and the coaches are actually happy with, because there's a lot of things to look at when we look at lighting, we look at projects. It's just, oh wow, it looks great, it's bright, but how does it affect the play? Not only basketball, volleyball, graduation setup, gym days, operational days. So there's a lot of pieces we look at. And even though we haven't set the program up yet, we hear nothing but great things. It's been a great fit. And then a slide here as well. It just talks about summarizing of what we've done over the last roughly 10 years. Just kind of gives you a ballpark, and we put our hands in just about everything, whether it's dugouts to fields to security, interior bleachers, auditorium lighting, sound systems. Facilities is a full range. It's just how do we equally get everybody a piece of the pie? And how do we, there's always a project, is how do we grade it? How do we put it in a scale, and where does it fall in the line? And overall, I think in the last 10, 15 years, we're very appreciative of what we've received from City Council and the taxpayers. We've accomplished a lot of projects in Portsmouth schools. Last one here before some show and tell pictures is, this is an idea of a summer workload. This does not show custodial cleaning, it doesn't show day-to-day operations, but this kind of shows, as I showed Brian being his first year with us, to kind of give you an idea of what I see for the summer. Some people think, oh, the teachers and kids leave and, it's a nice summer. It's where we get knee-deep into work, whether it's roof repairs. Little Harbor moved 9 classrooms this summer based off the PEEP and kindergarten move. It was just strategic for that building. So there's a lot of painting, a lot of moving, new carpentry, things like that. Dondero Modular, that was an encompassing project in itself. On top of, we also did Dondero windows. We also did siding at Dondero as well. But it also talks about, we jump into the athletic fields. There's things at the high school, also things at the middle school. Lister Academy, we closed that place up, moved them to a beautiful site. But we also had to clean the old site out, had to get that building ready to transfer back into the city. So just kind of gives you an idea. Our summers are very hectic, very busy. And we still try to take time off because it is nice, it's summer. However, it just kind of gives you an eyesight of how our summers are run. And then we get into pictures here, some I Love Show and Tells. Turf Field up on the left 2 years ago, Lister Academy in the middle. We did the bleachers a few years back, the playground piece of Little Harbor. Tennis courts we just opened up this past summer. We plan on doing a grand opening for the kids come spring. And then if you look at these two, the top 2 pictures are Dondero's windows and modular, New Franklin Mechanical. Also, we did in the blue classroom there, we did a ADA upgrade in room 136 at the high school. We installed some counters, cabinets, new fixtures throughout. There's a couple other pieces we're going to finish up this coming summer. It just wasn't budgeted, and so we worked that in. And as I talked in the bottom last 2 pictures of the high school lighting, the old lighting is to the left. You'll see there's a lot of shadowing in the far court. And if you look at that same court, it all disappeared. So there's a lot of consistency throughout the lighting system. There's some great programs we're going to install for them to come playoffs. The kids, they'll be very happy. So kind of that in a wrap up of a slide to slide. As I said, 187 is the athletic fields, 188 is the operating, and 189 is energy.
Kenny, when all of the overseeing of those major projects, you're basically you're acting as our general contractor, pretty much. Right?
Yes, unless the project is designed for a clerk of the works or a JBC, and I will oversee the scope in that project as well.
If you had to make a ballpark, because I know you don't know this number, how much do you think we've saved over the years from doing it versus hiring out, having somebody like you do that? I mean, an average person for a clerk for a project, I mean, it could be anywhere between $60,000 to $80,000 per project. Like the Dondero windows and the windows and the siding project, because the EEI had Sarah there full time for the summer. That was probably a $45,000 cost, for that piece there, 'cause that's their super. But if you look at projects wise, you're looking at probably about $60,000 to $80,000 for a clerk to be hired to oversee that one project based off its scale, or if they're going to see over a couple of projects. And we oversee multiple projects throughout. Excellent.
All right. Thanks, Kenny. Questions? Liz?
Yes, I have a couple. I guess first off, I want to say thank you for all the work that you've done. I don't know that everybody knows, and maybe they should, that you not only do this job, but you really have helped maintain the football program for the youth to keep it going over the years too. So I just want to thank you for that and all that you do. It's a lot. And so I guess I have two questions for you. The first off, I just want to say I appreciate looking at these budget line items under 187, 188, and 189, that the budget has pretty much maintained, other than what you're asking for, that year after year you've asked for and you haven't gotten, which is the supervisor position. So other than that, it doesn't seem as though you're requesting anything additional in your budget. However, I do want to ask, before I get to my second question, I do want to ask a little bit about the line items in section 188. It looks like there is an increase, but it's only an increase because it says reduce operating in repair and maintenance buildings, maintenance supplies, and in repair and maintenance. And I don't know if that was just because last year you were so efficient in those sections that those numbers, I mean, maybe you can speak to this, that those numbers were reduced, but there's some red for 2024 where it comes back in 2025. So I was just hoping you could explain that a little bit more, because it does equate to about 50,000.
The reduce of the operating budget was when the city council finally approved the budget. We had to go through and cut it to make that number that they gave us.
Okay.
So those reduced operatings on the left
Yeah.
are some of those cuts that were made.
Okay.
They're not made this year until we get to the final end, if we hopefully don't have to make those cuts, but that's generally when that happens, when you get to that budget at the very end, when the city approves it.
Okay.
You're going to have to get to that number that the city needs. You're going to see that throughout the entire budget.
So I can just clarify in terms
Yeah.
of process. So what's important to note always is that city council doesn't have line item authority. So in the case last year, it was, hey, here are the things we're going to approve from the requests that you had, and there was I want to say it was $300,000 just cash. It was like find it and operating someplace that you're going to be short. In addition to, here are some positions that we might not fund. So then after the fact, we had to go back in and decide where is that coming from. And some of these represent not necessarily choices made specifically by the council, but choices we had to make after the fact to try to make what the council gave us as an overall budget work from what you had approved from us originally.
And just to clarify too, the 2024 budget that we're seeing, are these the actual numbers as of what date? Like, I know we get
That's the
updates.
adopted budget from last year. That is
Last year's
not- That is
adopted.
not
Okay,
expenses at
and
all.
so are we over, I think we're over right now though for facilities, right? Or are we under?
And we're on path for facilities. There were some funds we're still moving around from the modulars.
Okay. So I guess with that said, I was hoping that you could speak to what those type of budget cuts do to you in your department, and then also maybe elaborate on this request for a supervisor, because I know for as long as I've been here, I believe, and this is my 4th year now, that you've requested the supervisor. So
I have.
I can imagine that maybe this request was there before I came on, and I guess I am I appreciate, students and staff stepping up over the summer to fill some of these needs, but
Yep.
I'm hoping that you can talk to that. If there is a strain, you could talk to it, because I'm wondering, is that where the supervisor would fill in, or you'd have other help fill in? Like, how do you navigate hiring on students and staff to help out when we're really, I'm guessing maybe we could have used a supervisor there to, or not. I mean,
Yep.
I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit.
Right, so the two questions, first part.
Yeah.
So back to budget cuts, when I understand there's reduction, but based off where operating is easy to pull funds out, is then I have to look at it and say, how do I reevaluate? How do we distribute the funds out throughout the year? Through electrical services, or is it mechanical upgrades? I have to then reevaluate, how do I take that $10,000 reduction throughout that school and then try to manage that throughout that year. That's usually how that falls into play. And that's where I try to reinstate that based off inflation and services and contract costs and hourly rates. It's trouble. It's hard sometimes to figure out how to keep the same level of what we expect, sometimes with a lesser number. And how do you juggle that? And sometimes it juggles it from school to school. In some schools, it's based off, we know what the high need is. I really focus on that, and then we filter funds down into the remaining of the school for the mechanical, electrical repairs, and elevator services, things like that. Your second part of the facility supervisor piece is to help oversee the day-to-day operations. I also not only oversee all the construction project, renovation projects, write bids, write the RFPs. I also then oversee the operation. I'm also sitting in a plow truck, just because of the labor that is needed to maintain all that. This is a thing that we looked at about 3 or 4 years ago to put into the budget of adding another maintenance person into that. So he would oversee the maintenance crew, the day-to-day, operate the maintenance program for work order systems, work with contractors to get into scheduling services and repairs, and then I could back out and kind of oversee him and then focus more on the bigger umbrella picture of capital renovations and oversee certain trainings and day-to-days. That's how that position is looking and be designed to move forward with.
But that person may also be in the plow truck like you are,
Well,
or
they
maybe
will, and
could
I'll
be in
come
the
out.
plow truck and you wouldn't be, or
I
something.
wouldn't be in the truck. I'd
Okay.
come out of the truck and they would replace me.
Yeah, I mean, because
now,
ideally
granted, there's
you
big
wouldn't be in that
storms I would
position.
volunteer and help out. It's because I choose to be a volunteer and help out. But right now, we look at how the plowing plan in place is, that I need to be in a vehicle to help out that process, or we're going to see an increase in contracted services.
Okay.
However, I still have to get out in the middle of the night and look at the place, figure out where we are contract-wise. Usually catch up with Zach doing rounds about 3:30, 3:45. He's also checked on the schools. We talk a lot. I've already talked to the city foreman on call. to
I'm
get-
looking forward to getting out of the truck too, so.
I know.
Not
But
the
I,
truck,
but
the
I have
car.
a lot of information I can feed Zach, so where he can try to make his decision on where we go on when we look at snowstorms. But it's a broader picture than that, not just because of snow. It's just the contracted services. We do a lot of work during the summer. There's a lot of help even oversee some of these projects, so that when I do take off for 3 or 4 days during the summer, I know I have somebody back there that can oversee that project.
I assume there's like a proverbial plow truck in the summer where you're on the job site versus kind of being able to manage if you don't have that supervisor position.
Correct. So I do drive a truck and all that. However, I think I've created my maintenance department to a point that we don't micromanage. They know the workload. They have the work orders. They have iPads. They have cell phones. We talk for 10, 15, 20 minutes in the morning. Most times in the summer, I don't see them again until the following day, because I believe I have that much trust in them and know what the workload. But in order to trust that, I still have to get out and take a peek, make sure work's getting done, getting feedback from them, and move that. And that's where that role would come into play.
Are you fully staffed now?
Right now, we are short a half custodian, 1.5. We just hired another one today. And then we'll be looking to hire a half-time custodian for Little Harbor. That was part of that food service position piece. As I stated in the beginning of my statement, out of 21 custodians, I have 14 brand-new ones who started last May. They only have 1 year of accredited service with us yet. We've had that much of a changeover.
Sorry, here's my last question. Knowing that the city council is sort of looking to the school board for budget cuts, should there be these reduced operating costs again to your budget in order to find somewhere to cut the budget, what would that mean to you?
It's not, it's not a city council request. City council will give you the overall reduction costs, and then it falls back into the administration team to look at where we can functionally cut. Facilities is usually the number one. It's the easiest one to take a small hit based off keeping a para, keeping a teacher, keeping a speech specialist. It's a juggling game on my end on how do we still maintain a level of expectance of service with a reduced cost.
Thank you.
So we move on.
I think one of the things, I remember Kenny having a conversation with you about just ongoing maintenance costs for buildings, and the idea that, like at the high school, you've got 1,000 people moving 8 times a day.
Yeah,
and-
so Zach's statement there, I'll clarify the way. So we look at how facilities are used. Schools are the second most used facility in the United States, maybe the world, to be honest with you. However, you look at 1,000 students, they go into the school, they move in between first block, they move in between second block, they go to lunch, they go to third block, they go to prep, they go to last block, and they leave. That's 7 times of 1,000 kids moving through a facility. So they have 7,000 people technically moving throughout that high school in one day. Times 5 is 35,000 feet moving through. That's not counting staff. That's not counting the play coming this weekend at the high school, because in middle school, we had to do another electrical upgrade in the middle school on their control panels. So you look at all that added wear and tear, doors open and closing, footwork, carpet repairs. You don't see that in a grocery store. The only place you're going to see that is an airport. So when you look at that analysis, people wonder why there's always a constant door maintenance, mechanical maintenance, or somewhere in the line of electrical service.
All right.
I am going to also pass around. I know that from time to time, this is the city's been on a cycle where every, Kenny, 5 to 10 years, there's a push for can we find is between this department and say DPW, can we find efficiencies or synergies, or is there some way to mesh these things together, because there are some things that are common that we're doing and find savings. And I'm just going to pass around to folks 2 different documents. One is a Blue Ribbon Committee report from 2010 under Mayor Farini that looked at these different elements. And then the other is just a set of meeting notes from 2015 from work that was done collectively between the 2 departments to look at potential, areas where they already collaborate and can collaborate, and what were other things that folks could do. And I think, Kenny, you and I didn't sit down and talk through all of this, but for the most part, most of this are things that we're already doing.
Correct.
Where it's capable
we do a lot with DPW and vice versa. They assist us in certain ways that I just don't have the technology or capabilities of doing, instantly for paving. I don't have the knowledge for paving, but Dave DeFos has been a great asset and person to bounce things off, or say, this is what I have for funding, and he takes it and runs, and we work together. But we also looked at mowing, we looked at other services as well, where, for instance, it's small to a point, but for mowing services, we had a crew doing a high school, but they had a crew doing a pool. We had a crew doing Sherman School, but they had a crew doing the athletic fields and the field out. So it's like, you take care of all that, we'll take care of all this. But there was also other little things, whether it's legal or there's other pieces of winter operations and certain things, elevator contracts, generator contracts, plowing contracts, electrical contracts now. They've kind of used some of our models, but there's also models that they've created that we're using. So now we're bidding certain services out as a city as a whole, whereas it's just school department going their way and them going their way, because there's certain contracts, such as the elevator, is a win for us because we only have 6 or 7 throughout our buildings. They're like 3 times the amount. So we looked at certain things as that, especially the generators. We only have 1 generator we're responsible for, and that's the middle school. All the other generators are the pump stations in the high school, which falls in the EOC. So there's a few things that we've been able to benefit through those contracts. However, there's certain things that we've used, as the electrical contract and plumbing is, we've used my boilerplate, and they've tweaked it out to maintain their things, but now we also bounce off that. So we're only putting that services out to bid once now, versus once for us every 3 years and once every 2 or 3 years for them. So it's all been consolidated. So it's done well.
So without an in-depth thing, but just through your experience and all the time you've spent doing this work, do you think at this point that we're leaving significant savings on the table because we haven't collaborated in some way with DPW or other elements of the city, that, there's some things that we could be doing that would create significant savings? Or is it stuff that we're really just talking about things in the margins?
I think right now, more things in the margin. If we look at as operations for a whole, I think we've hit every part where we're as a city as a whole is benefiting as a good factor. Especially, we just went out to bid with Brian. We talked about a month ago. We just went out for energy. City is their whole building, but using the high school in our facilities just helps them market out the usage, so you get a better cost for electrical. So that's, so we're not leaving anything really onto the table. It's just where we are now is how can we more efficiently use the contracts and the services that we have synergies together And we continue to tweak things here and there. However, we look at, there's certain operational pieces that just it's a totally different focus. And it's just, would it work combining? There's a lot of pieces to pull together, even if it was a thought of, just because of continuity, consistency throughout the schools. I think right now what we do with Public Works and I think with legal or with purchasing downstairs, and from my side is a lot of great things. I just don't see how we can expand on that and some of my stuff at the moment.
Thanks, Kenny.
Carrie?
I believe you, and I think Patty, or I'm sure all the administration was involved in sort of security assessment. I forget
Yep.
the name or
The
acronym.
Homeland Security, yep.
And just curious with the changes that are noted in here in the recent projects, either are additional improvements in the budget or in the CIP, or are there going to be additional asks or needs to meet those projects? Or
So, yes. So if you look at my timeline in security, I do show you where we've picked up ESSER1, ESSER2, and ESSER3.
Yeah.
And renovations and pays. Always in the capital CIP plan, we always put $150,000 to $200,000 for security upgrades. That's just, we leave a broad statement. When we get that funding available from city council, then we look at what is the need. Is it cameras? Is it upgrading? 1 year is called DVRs. It's the storage. High school at one point was at a 6.5 day storage capacity. Now they're just shy of 3 weeks. Elementary's different system can hold up to 3 months. So there's where we look at certain things. And with the Homeland Security view right now, they're giving us recommendations on where we were, where we are now. And they've got the previous report that we did back in 2017, how we've made great strides since then. We didn't have cameras, we didn't have access control in any of the elementaries. We didn't have panic buttons. We also added access control panic buttons to shut down access control throughout the buildings in case there is an intruder. Working with Patty, we have a new program called NAV 360 where we can create a medical alert, emergency alert, intruder alert. It goes out through admin teams, goes out for the whole building for communication. Principals can take attendance, it's broad range of extra things. We started handing out this past week two-way radios as part of Zaxby's. It's been a longer project than I expected, but now schools can communicate through two-way radios. Admin can communicate throughout the city on two-way radios. We can communicate through PD on two-way radios. So there's the broader things that we've been doing. It's not part of Homeland Security recommendations, so we start picking at. And on the bottom of that list talks about ongoing hardware cameras, things, because some cameras and the PTZs at the high school have still been there since 2002. Great camera. Once it dies, I go from 1 camera to 3, because this 1 camera will give me a pan vision. Now I have to put something into this direction, that direction, and that direction. So instead of buying a $3,500 camera, I'm buying a $8,500 to $11,000 camera to help offset what we had. So that's where we look at the capital funding, every that. And then as a Homeland Security, we're prepping for the next round of grant money. I don't believe there's any ESSER money. That's what we use for Dondera windows. But we look into what is the next round, and we put a project for all schools, whether it's current cameras, film, something, and we'll see what the state will give us.
Any other questions? You got one more?
just to follow up on, is there any large security improvements in the CIP currently? Or it's primarily just the maintenance?
So I have an operating cost in 188 that we do either line 001 or 0001 or 00, where we use for daily maintaining the systems that we have in place. To get broader into that, then it usually falls into city CIP funding. Every 3 years, I get $1 million from city council. I do a broad range of projects, as well as you see that it says high school interior renovations. That's hiring a painting company to come in through and repaint the entire of the high school, maybe some tile work, carpet work here and there. So that's where we look at bigger projects. I also work with Brian, or will work with Brian, as I did with Nathan and Steve Bartlett back in the day, this is my list of needs at the end of the year in the budget. At the end of the year, is there leftover funds to catch this, or funds to pick up this, or how do we juggle the budget around a little bit to pick up this need that we see in security? again, we've done great strides. There's still a lot of work to do, but where we were 6 years ago to now, camera-wise, access control-wise, it's unbelievable.
All right, thanks, Gary. Byron and then Pip.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Brian was alluding to earlier relative to you acting as like the GC on all these projects. I think the scope and impact for the size of team relative to the projects is like really outsized. So I'm pretty blown away by that. I had a couple questions on the timeline relative to the playground. Just clarifying the 600K for 26, and then 500 for 27, and 500 for 28. Those are not all for. Those are all for. There's 3 different projects. Or
Correct. So FY '26 is geared for Little Harbor.
Yeah.
The 100,000 for the hiring the RFP.
Yeah.
Getting then with 500,000 for their playground. 27 is 500,000 for New Franklin.
Okay.
And then 28 is 500,000 for Dondero.
Okay. And then the 500,000. I'm trying to remember conversations about the scope of what would be needed at Little Harbor. Does the 500,000 get to the bar in terms of like what the proposed designs are looking
We're
like?
hoping.
What's that? We're hoping.
We're hoping.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I believe, looking at what Little Harbor has done already in rough design, and I can quote myself if I'm wrong, it was right around 300, give or take, right? And then we got to, so their base was about 300,000. However, we also have to look at pour and play of the new changes in regs to make ADA access. So when we look at that, we can still add mulch to the program, to the playground areas in certain parts. We still have to add pour and play, which is a hard surface for ADA access to every device or every play piece. So it depends on how we lay that out. That 500,000 in first phase will come very tight.
Okay. And then looking back to the Dondero, which I think is the most recent big playground build,
Yes, nature and play, yep.
the nature one, was that CIP from the city, or there's a different process there?
That was the funding process through the PTA.
It was all PTA. Okay.
Yeah, and there was some conjunction of city funding out of my budget of certain small pieces here and there, but there was a majority of that came out of their PTA.
Has there ever been, to what the speaker was saying, sort of capital line item in our school budget relative to building new play structures?
Playgrounds in art, so this is the first time I've been through a capital project for playground structures.
Okay.
Back in 2000, when PEP 2000 was involved, I was just a maintenance employee then. It was part of my predecessor and Nancy, I think that was Peter Torrey back in the day as the business administrator. So I can't elaborate how that portrayed out.
Okay.
Nancy would have to give more for input on that one.
Okay. And then last one on the, actually I lost my train of thought on that last one on the playgrounds, but I had a couple on the energy, on
Yep.
the, so the power purchase agreement on the solar, that works in, by we're paying per kilowatt hour that we're producing of what's installed. Is that the mechanic?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So whatever we would generate as a savings is going back to them to
Okay.
pay for that agreement. There is a clause in the contract that states in year 10 that the city has the right to purchase out the remaining part of that agreement. Then it falls into whatever savings, and the savings and maintenance
Yeah.
would fall back
Right.
into the city of Portsmouth.
Is there, do you have a notion of like the projected scope of savings associated with buying out that purchase agreement?
So what I see right now on my energy charts is we are generating anywhere between $30,000 and $38,000 a year in energy.
Yeah.
When I cross that against the high school, it's a month and a quarter of AC, or a month and a half, maybe 2, depending on heating load of usage. The operating high school, if you look in 188, the electrical cost is significant.
So the value is there in terms of buying out that?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And I think it makes sense for eventually for us to buy it, because it's a reduction that just helps the budget as we move forward.
And I had one more question. This maybe is, I don't know, for Zach or, so there's this discussion of combining services with the city. Just as a general question, saying some hypothetical, I don't know, the city takes on, I guess my general question is like, who ends up owning the combined line item where like when those services combine together?
These are really good questions. And so I think, if you think about it now, so Kenny, in terms of things that right now, as part of these kind of, we'll cover this, DPW, you do this type of arrangements, right now, give me an example of something that DPW kind of does for us. You mentioned some things. But
So like couple of the contracts, they take it and run and we piggyback it.
Yeah.
Whether it's elevators or generators, snow removal.
How about in terms of like examples of where they perform a service that if they weren't doing it, we would be doing it? I think I'm trying to get to Byron's question, which is where does that currently live in the budget?
There's no service that we can't provide
Okay.
except for some engineering
Yeah.
that they have in their staffing.
Yep.
Like I said, Dave DeFos has been a great asset for us for paving for me. That would be the piece that we can't do in-house, is that engineering piece that they have in their office line. When we get into operating it all, there's nothing that we can't do in-house that they're doing equally together.
So on that engineering piece, do they, and I should know the answer to this, but they don't, in terms of our departmental budgets, they're not charging us across, like, here's your fee school for the engineering services we provided as DPW, or?
No, not yet, no.
Okay,
And
okay.
it's because we understand they have their operating day, they have their job to do.
Yep.
And Peter Rice and I, we talk a lot about this, I say, hey, I'm gonna go talk to so-and-so this, as long as I'm not shifting their focus to me for the next 4 weeks,
Yeah.
then I do expect to get paid, to get a service
Get a bill,
bill. Based off that, I've taken that gentleman away from his job that he's been hired
Yeah.
to do for that. And if that's the case, then we'll look at something
And we would see
different.
some type
And we
of-
would see some type of thing, and I think that's fair, because he
Right.
wasn't hired to do this piece, he was hired to do that piece.
Sure.
So we talk about that a lot, even with tree service. They
Yeah.
do some tree works here and there and all that, but if it gets too large of a scale, then we'd sit down and say, what is the cost?
Yeah.
Potholes sometimes, I've made a comment, well, then with the material, or we go to their garage, we get paid the labor, we pay for the material. If we go into the garage and do the small engine repairs, because we're adding their workload, it's material that shouldn't come out of Peter's budget, it should come out of mine. And so we will see a bill from that.
So there is some give and take.
Yep.
Depending on the projects, but I don't know, I think it's not clear what the answer, a larger scale
Yeah, it's
shift
just
of
like, what would be
staff
the framework?
would not be,
Yeah.
I think there would
Yeah.
be conversations that would have to be had. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Byron.
Thank you.
Pip?
Thanks. First, thank you for this report. It's especially the things that have come up recently, like New Franklin and the playground. It's really helpful to have this information. And to that end, I'm wondering if at some point you might be able to provide us with a list of the upgrades. I really appreciate the list of the upgrades at New Franklin. I think that's really helpful for us all to see. And I'm wondering if you could give us similar lists for Little Harbor and Dondero.
I can, however, to clarify that question, in 15 and 16, Little Harbor took on its first renovation since the facility was built back in 1969.
Okay,
Pretty much back to concrete and steel.
yeah,
Mechanical, electrical, LED lighting, the whole nine. Same way with Dondero.
okay,
They were the same way. And I can give you a broad list of everything that we did there, which is fine with me. It's simple to do.
Yeah.
But those were full-blown construction
I see.
renovation projects.
okay.
So New Franklin, we started picking at. So if you look at the next funding availability for the 3 and 5, which I know is going to have to adjust, they're going to fall in the same line item. Gotten out the bathrooms, new tile, new fixtures, new quarry tile coming in, new paint scheme throughout. There's some smoke walls that have to, some walls that have to turn into smoke walls. There's some partition walls that will come down. We'll look at that building as a whole, including the kitchen, working with food services, some upgrades in there as well. We'll look at that building and get to the level of construction at New Franklin and at Dondero and Little Harbor
Okay.
received as well.
Okay.
That's when we'll be moving
So you're
to
saying
that.
this has been sort of to just maintain it?
It's been to
but
maintain
hasn't-
it.
But
yeah.
it hasn't yet had its major renovation?
Hasn't had its cosmetic
Okay.
renovation yet.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. And to that end, the My understanding is that the design for the upgrades to New Franklin was made several years ago, is that correct? Or the initial plans?
So we have, as part of the scope of Little Harbor and Dondero, we use Banwell Architects.
Okay.
As we moved from Little Harbor to Dondero, we had them start on Little Harbor, Dondero. As we were working on Dondero, we had them look at New Franklin.
Okay.
So they do understand what the layout is, where the issues are in firewalls or not, or ADA compliance, the bathrooms, things like that. They also looked at how do we do an addition or not? Where can we do an addition or not, based off the redistricting comments of enrollment, getting staff out of a closet who's doing one-on-one to more of, as we call the Kate Suite at Dondero. It works out very well. You walk in, it's all nice and wide, and you got room, and they all can collaborate day one-on-one.
Yeah.
So we've looked at that, and we kind of have preliminary thoughts
Okay.
and how that, and then we're moving into the next phase to sit down with Joanne soon, with Banwell, to get a broader understanding what her needs are, and then we can kind of start fine-tuning that as we move into the next phases of capital funding.
And that Banwell work was 2019, I think?
2019, yes.
And that was based on, at the time, what people anticipated was going to be available in the CIP, which is the same amount of money now. It's not going to cover what was in that plan. And that was driven by, at the time, there were some broad kind of ideas, I think, that were primarily coming out of central office about what was most necessary.
Yep.
And so what we're looking to do now is to do some refreshed staff re-engagement about what are your needs and what does that look like. And then on the heels of that, in conjunction with Banwell, then come to some decisions about, well, what do we have to spend and what is that going to do? And then, Kenny, groundbreaking for that project is a summer out.
Summer out.
So
yes.
so we would be, not this summer, but the next is when we would be doing that work. So.
Okay.
So it'd be the summer, so it'd be in conjunction of the summer of Little Harbor install and with New Franklin.
And I
potentially.
will say my lean as we go into that process is going to be similar to what we talked about during redistricting, is that if there's where there is a give and take between the quality of the space and adding quantity of space at that building, to the extent to which I'm influencing the project, my lean will be towards the quality of the space and making sure the quality of what is there is on par. We're trying to be on par with what you see when you walk into Dondero, and so that will put a pinch on additional square footage. I think Byron's talked about before about once you break the footprint of the existing space, just how your costs expand exponentially, and I think that's something we're aware of. But we'll see as we re-engage with Banwell and we have those conversations.
Okay, I'm glad to hear there's more design work coming.
I have a lot more design work.
Okay. I just have one more question about the playgrounds. In terms of what you've done so far, not specifically at Little Harbor, but in general, what is your approach to the maintenance of the playgrounds, and how do you assess the safety of them?
So so they're inspected weekly through the supervisors. We have game time. Travis comes in every year or 2 years. He's the playground supplier who comes in and reviews it as well. We look at certain wear and tear items. We then will talk with the BA at that time to look at additional funding to change a bridge out or change decking at New Franklin, for instance. We've changed decking and bridge at New Franklin and Dondero and Little Harbor over the years. A long-term bigger piece, and then it falls into, and to be honest, part of that PEP 2000 was all part of PTA-driven outside source. That's how I was kind of told playgrounds were done. And so that's kind of been full circled into now under the umbrella of the facilities, where we will then we have a line item in the budget, but how do we increase that line item on extra maintenance or extra inspections, especially with a pour and play in place. That's a different pervious pavement structure that's going to probably have to have more maintenance over time based off winters as this with frost heaves and depending on that. So we'll have to look at that as a bigger, broader picture as we move into for the maintenance and repairs of playgrounds.
Did I understand you right that you said the PEEP playground is going to be done at the same time?
Yes.
At Little Harbor, and will that come out of that same budget?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to create the same plan because we have to go to the wetlands of DES. So I can't go to Little Harbor and do this side of the building and then come back and say I have to do this side of the building. It just makes sense to do the plan at once. The plan's going to take anywhere between 8 weeks to a couple of months, depending on where we hit that window, how do we system, and then we also have to go locally to our conservation as well. And as I put a note in there, I also have to go to locally for Don Darrow and Little Harbor as well, when we look at their designs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Brian and Kenny, right now, if something, swing breaks or whatever it might be on one of the playgrounds, where's the spot that we pull from?
There's a line item in the operating budget that says playgrounds near paving, like $2,000 or $2,500. We pull the material out of that. Swings and things, I believe, we should have 2 or 3 of them sit downstairs in basement with a chain and a rubber swing getting ready just to plug and play. Those are usually one of the higher wear and tear items is the C-clamps up top.
Sure.
That's because the kids, you just, over time, you'll see them just decrease. And that's where we get that. Is Little Harbor, I think, still is one of the older swing sets that's still in operation.
Gotcha.
Gary?
I believe in the past you have refused to make big estimates, so I'm going to ask you to make one anyway, but
Off the record?
no, totally on the record. So I know that building costs have changed a ton, and I'm just curious if you would venture a ballpark of like the 2017-18 Don Darrow upgrades at $10 million. What would that cost if we were doing that today?
Don Darrow or New Franklin?
Don Darrow. I'm just trying to put the scope of like the budget in my mind together.
$16?
16?
18?
Okay. So the 5 that we have between 4 years, and
Yes, but you have to take, I'm also, when I looked at Don Darrow's, your question as I answered it, I looked at electrical, mechanical, and other things.
It's
So I
several of those things are already done.
broader
Right.
piece.
okay.
So you have to look at what we've already done at New Franklin and start deducting that off that price, because I just can't break, it's harder for you to answer your question if I try to
Right. All
swipe
the
out
components of
mechanical,
it down.
electrical, and all
Yeah.
that, versus the cosmetics and ADA compliances and fire upgrades as well. So when I answered your question, mine was based off full circle.
Thank you. Thank you for your wild estimation.
All right. Thanks, Liz.
I just was hoping that you could talk to about the modular units at Don Darrow right now. Like, what is the plan for them? What are we looking at costs for removing them? What does that look like?
So the modular, we have a 2-year contract. We have 1 more year after this.
Okay.
I believe the contract's right around $36,000 a year, give or take, for that, plus whatever energy costs there may be. We do have a bathroom out there. We have it going into a storage tank into the ground that we pump out every 2 weeks based off estimated volume to allow them to keep their kids out there. To be honest, I think teachers are not going to be happy when they have to move out of that modular. They love it. They have quiet time. The kids can focus on a lot of things. There's not a lot of distractions. They also brag they have AC come spring and fall versus the rest of the building. It was a huge task to take on, but right now the way they're operating it, it's been a great addition for Don Darrow.
And is there a buyout for those, or like if we were to buy them outright, what would the cost be?
Buyout what?
Like you're saying right now we're paying $36 a year. I assume that's a lease that we're in at this
You buy the
point.
lease out, you pay $36,000.
To buy the lease, like let's say we want it longer than 2 years.
Then we'd have to renegotiate a new contract.
Okay.
Right now, we have a 2-year contract.
So there's no like buyout though?
So being buyout at to buy the unit itself,
Yeah.
we can do that. We just haven't discussed that cost. That would be up in the thousands of dollars range. And I'm not talking like 20 or 30. You're probably looking up to about 100, maybe
Yeah,
plus
I know
for that.
modulars are a lot more now than
Yep.
they used to be.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess I'm curious what the buyout is as we look to, the space needs in our district and the needs for special education space. and the fact that, you know, teachers are enjoying having this extra space, whether they use it for classrooms or potentially for special education services, and what would the long-term cost be? So I guess I would be curious long-term. I'm happy to hear that we have it another year, but I also am wondering, you know, going forward, if this is something that may be beneficial to budget long-term for.
There's that possibility, but we also have to take consideration, this is not a unit that we can just move around.
Yeah.
This is where you'd have to permanently stay there.
Yeah.
And if that was a permanent structure, then we have to look at other codes, fire code, compliance code, to get this building into full code. Now, we are code, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
We have full fire protection, but if we're gonna make this a permanent structure, then we look into enclosing the ramp to the building, and how do we rechange the egress plans out of the building, because now we don't want the kids to have that air gap. We're gonna then sprinkle the system, there's other significant costs.
So the only way to get around that would be to renew a lease?
Well, I wouldn't say get around it, it's just if we need it longer, we would renew the lease for the modular.
Yeah.
What we have in place is 100% safe in life safety and security of what we installed. But
Okay.
if you're looking as a permanent structure, then we jump into a different code compliance.
Okay.
And then how do we have the children come from point A to point B, which then we would enclose, and then it's just additional add-ons to cost.
Okay. Thank you.
Lisa, maybe you can wrap us up here.
Yeah, no, I just
Yeah.
have a really quick clarification on the playgrounds. In the budget book, that was 1.8 million, but when I'm adding up in the slideshow is 1.6. Was that?
And I misread the budget book of what city counts. I was on the impression it was 5, 5, and 1.
No, they included in year 27 and 28, they included $100,000 around the possibility of the need for additional,
Engineering.
But it comes from the operating fund.
but it comes from the
Yeah,
operating,
operating
right.
fund.
So it's
yeah,
not going to be,
I didn't see that part. I was,
No, it's okay.
I've seen what we've submitted, and if they've readjusted it, I haven't seen the adjustment.
but the
yet.
bonded pieces are 5, 5,
Yeah,
and
5 and 5, yeah.
So.
And in terms of the ongoing maintenance piece, I know Pip asked about that, but I'm curious, at some point, would that appear under?
In 188.
maintenance? Okay, under maintenance going forward, so once they're built, that's where it would show up.
We're
Okay,
following
thank
188
you.
for each site.
All right, thanks, Lisa. And, yeah, thanks, Kenny. This is great. Great information. I love seeing all the charts and graphs. You show that every time you come, it's great to see what we're saving, and you keep a close eye on all the energy use in the district, so great job. Thanks.
Thank you. All righty. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken.
Before we transition, I just wondered if there's couple of quick other budgetary, just kind of tack-ons that are more kind of previews of things coming, and then reviews of some things we were discussed. So I did a C to C minus job of explaining Fund 207 at our last meeting. And so Brian put together something in writing to help further explain how Fund 207 works. And actually, it's a bit of a history lesson on Fund 207. I will say quickly, before Brian kind of passes that out and gives you a quick verbal overview, that I want to make sure that what's clear is the 207 has appeared in all your budget binders before. So it wasn't a matter of like 207's never been presented or 206 has never been presented. It's been there. It's been available. The lines have been transparent. I think the dialogue around it being really showing the connection to staffing was not something that was really fleshed out as well. But it's not as fleshed out as we're trying to do this time around. So I want to make sure, definitely not trying to cast any aspersions on anyone who's had their hands on these budgets in the past. The stuff has been there, it's been available, it's been transparent, just like it appears this time. But Brian's got some helpful history on it.
I don't actually have handouts. I can email it out
my
tomorrow.
apologies,
So I'd be more than happy to email out my narrative. But just to give a little, and go back in the Wayback Machine to see how this all started. Many, many years ago, when SAU 50 started tuitioning into us, there had to be, what was happening was they'd have the tuition rate, and then what happens in normal tuition agreements is the special ed costs are above and beyond that tuition rate. So what was happening was those tuition, those special ed costs were going into Fund 207. And they were just going in there and they were paying transferring back to the Portsmouth School District for any services that we provided. So basically that money was, there was money coming into it, there's money going out of it. I think what ended up happening, just looking back into the history, that maybe not all the bills were getting paid out of it. Some of them were probably getting paid out of the general fund. So what ended up happening over many years was that money built up. And it built up to the tune of probably a few $1 million. So an audit was done at one point, and they realized, hey, we're sitting on a good, healthy amount of money. Why are we continuing to pay special ed costs? Why don't we just pay it out of this Fund 207? Great idea. So that's what they did. They just decided to basically pay it out of 207. Well, the issue came where what ended up happening is people started to get put into 207. Special ed, whether it be powers or teachers or what have you, they were put into that fund and they were getting paid out of that fund. Now, there's two issues there. First of all, you stop putting money into it, but you're taking money out of it. The other problem is those FTEs are not showing up on your operating fund for your total amount of people that you have. So ultimately what ended up happening is money started to get drained. They got a little lower. Well, we still have to pay these people. So what they did was they started had to find a revenue source for this. The first thing of revenue source was they started taking the CAD aid. Well, back then it was CAD aid. Now it's SPED aid. And transferring that over to 207. So instead of it going to the operating fund, it got put into 207 to keep it floating.
Brian, can you just in case people don't know what CAD aid is or special ed aid, can you give them the nutshell of what that means?
That is when we spend money on special ed services. Once we reach a certain threshold, the state pays a percentage. The higher we pay, or the more money we pay for those services, the more money we get back. It's an unfortunate formula where we have to spend money to get money. And the more money we actually spend, the more money we get back from the state. And actually, if you have dug into that first narrative section in this book, is actually a breakdown of what the formula is and how we get it. So that amount was put in there, and it seemed to work for a while, and then after a while, that wasn't enough. So what they did was they took the Medicaid funding that we were getting, and that Medicaid funding used to be a lot more than it is now, would also be put into that 207 to kind of keep it alive and keep it floating. At one point, the SPED aid and the Medicaid wasn't enough to float the 207. So what ended up happening was now they're taking they're carving out some of the revenue of the tuition that SAU 50 was paying. And I think the reasoning behind that, I don't know, I'm just looking back historically, the reasoning I think behind that was these services were being used on SAU 50 students. So maybe that was probably paying their share of special ed costs, because SAU 52, Portsmouth was not charging for special ed costs to SAU 50 because of that Fund 207. So at some point, those funds aren't enough, so now we do a line item transfer from our operating fund. Once that line item transfer happens, you're using taxpayer funds to fund this fund. It no longer becomes, that's kind of where this fund morphed into what it originally was planned for to what it is today. Once you start putting taxpayer funds into that fund, it now becomes it should be part of the operating fund according to generally accepted accounting principles. So basically, it comes under the guise of the school board. It's really what it should be. It's what it should be under. So what's been happening since that point was, you can actually see in the budget I've highlighted where there are transfers to 207 from the operating budget, but there's also some revenue that gets sliced off and put in there. We also have two other revenue streams, the SPED aid and Medicaid, that also goes into 207. And that's kind of where we are today. And when I came here and I had discussions with Zach, is we realized that we're not following generally accepted accounting principles. We really need to get this under the operating fund And so what this is now turned into, it's about 42, 43 FTEs right now of people that are in there that are working for you, that are working here in the district, that are providing special ed services. They're just being funded from a different fund that really shouldn't be there. It should be in the operating fund.
I guess I'm wondering as we move forward, and I really appreciate this, redo or reset here. I'm concerned with moving forward with budget cuts to the city, budget cuts to the state, budget cuts to the federal government, and grant funding and everything else that we're getting. I feel like this would be better. Like, is there a way we could just transition to a model that is, here's our budget, here's all of our people, here's everything. Here's a line of how much we're getting from SAU 50. Here's a line about how much we're getting from the federal government. Here's a line of what we're getting from the state government. So that, I guess it would obviously help to know where the state government funding is going to specifically or what's accounting for that. But I feel like this model and having this section kind of throws everything. So maybe a lot of us didn't really see how certain funds are affecting our budget or not affecting our budget. And I think long term, as we go to this new age, the golden age of America, I think we need to have a real clear visual for the general public about where money is coming and going from that is consistent with, hey, we still need these grants, we still need these funds. They're continuing to fund a majority, like not a majority, but a substantial amount of our budget.
Well, that would be a revenue report, and all our revenues are estimated every year.
Yeah.
We don't know until the end of the year actually how much we're getting in revenue. And even then, it takes a while to figure that out because they come from all different directions. This Fund 207 should basically, you could take all those people and put it in the operating fund, but now you've increased your FTEs by 40 plus, but you haven't actually increased your net costs to the city. The reason being is all those sources of funds now get pushed over into the operating fund, so your net cost is actually zero. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if you'd want to, I don't think that's the ultimate goal. It's kind of tough to do in 1 year because of the amount of people and the expense is going to go up, but your revenue is also going to go up, so it's going to offset itself. That's kind of the challenge. And 206 operates somewhat similarly, but not the same. 206 could stay itself. 206 is RJLA. That could actually move under the operating fund and be its own cost center, which it really should be because we want to see how that operates more as it's a separate specialized school. So, but 207 is the bigger of the two. That is the one that is challenging, and to get it to where it needs to be would probably take some time. I would say probably a few years to move it over. There are changes I could make now that would not increase the bottom line until you start taking the revenue. If I can stop a line item transfer, I can not do the line item transfer, put that amount into the budget, but your FTEs are going to go up. That can sometimes send up a red flag with certain people.
Well, I think, is it fair to say, I think this is one, sorry, Ryan, I didn't mean to cut off. I was just going to say that a lot of the conversation since I've been here on the city side has been about what are the opening conversation is about your number of FTEs. Well, we use FTEs. They just talk about people, but what are the number of full-time equivalents that you have? And that dialogue for a long time has not included folks who are in 207 or 206.
Not just 207. I mean, grants.
All grants,
right. Little clippers.
I feel like that's a gross misrepresentation of who we have working for us in the city, and people need to understand that this is how many people we have, and we're like subsidizing, or maybe that's not the right term, but we are financing those folks through this fund or that fund, but this is how many people we have working for us. So should something go awry with SAU 50 or go awry with federal grants or go awry with city funding, there's a lot more we're going to lose.
We agree that we think that's just the way in which things however things evolved over time to get to where we are, I think people were always acting, I don't think, everybody was doing what they thought was right as we went. I think we're at a point where it makes sense to try to make these things clearer, just like you said, Liz, clearer to the public, because we're not adding a whole bunch of people, but the way in which it could look like, depending on how you broke up the chart, looks like, where do all these people come from? Well, these are all people who have been working for us. And it's just a matter of how are we accounting for those folks and how we're paying for them.
And I don't think there was any ill intent in this. I just think
Absolutely.
I just think
Absolutely not.
what this fund did, it morphed, it changed over time. The intent changed, or the function of that fund changed, and it just should have been wrapped in at some point, and maybe it was too cumbersome. I don't know. I can't speak to that. It was before my time, but I just know, doing this, using generally accepted principles and the way school accounting works and the way this is funded, it has to work its way back into the operating fund.
I get that, but it also, I feel like this makes when we've looked at budgets as a school department or a school board year after year, we're missing these people from our budgets. We're looking at the high school budget and we're like, oh, we have this many paras, and we have this and that, and we're missing so many that are put into this section that we never saw before. So I think if we're going to look at the high school budget, we need to see all the paras that are there. So if we could, I don't know if we need to take a vote to move forward in a different way, but I do feel like it would make sense long term to have the high school budget be the high school budget with every FTE that we have on the high school budget, and then account for however we're going to account for them, but see them all together.
Yeah, I think your point has been made. Yeah, we
Thanks.
get it. Yeah. Go ahead, Gary.
I'm curious, so I feel, just for me, it would be helpful to move up to the revenue report, which is later in the agenda, but let me just go back to this. So, is the reluctance to have the income, is the reluctance to have the revenue included within the budget because it's so variable? Or are there ballpark or minimum expectations we could have that we could be incorporating?
The revenue is generally what the state and the city looks at when they determine what gets set to taxation. So let's say you have a $60 million budget, you have 10 million in revenue, okay, 50 million is going to taxes. So when everything comes out at the end and they approve the budget, I'm sending them my revenue. I'm working actually with Nathan to determine what the revenue is so it matches what the city sees. And that's how we determine what's going to taxation, which is the exact same process we use when we set the tax rate in the fall. So we determine what our estimated revenues are for this year because that goes to taxation. But again, when we decide on the budget, the number they give us is the number minus the revenue, but there's also additional funds because food service is a wash. Like food service, you're not going to see because that's self-funded. Grants are self-funded, so you generally don't see those. Those end up, I call it a wash, where just what comes in, what goes out is reimbursed by what comes in. So that's what these funds are supposed to be. They're all supposed to be self-funding. This one is not self-funding, which is why 207 is not self-funding, which is why it should be in the operating fund. But there's revenue coming from all different places. Some of it's little, some of it's a lot. Obviously, tuition is a huge amount. It's actually probably one of the biggest revenue the city has outside of property taxes. But we also have grant funding. It just doesn't go into the operating fund.
Any other questions? I will say that, what Liz says is exactly what I've been saying for, 7-8 years that I've been on the school board. And it's a blind spot, and I get that it's a wash, but if there's ever a chance, like if if it's food service, that's a wash, right? That one sort of makes sense to me. But when something is grant funded, and we end up hiring a teacher or somebody for that position, and then all of a sudden we're going to be holding the bag for that position at some point if a grant goes away, or it's just nice to be able to see that, but it feels like a blind spot sometimes when we see that. And whatever that looks like in the end, if we can get rid of some of those blind spots, it would help a lot, for sure.
And I think that's our intent, is both.
Yeah.
And what you get in the budget book, and we keep the org chart that we gave you, we keep refining and adding detail.
Yeah,
and
that
I
was
think
super helpful.
it's like, here's, it's one thing to see it in here, it's another one to be like, here are all these people, 207, 207, 207,
Yeah,
just to see, and you're like, okay, now I understand the scope of what we're talking about. With the purpose of eliminating those blind spots and having you as a collective understand kind of the full kind of financial context in which we're operating, even if it's not exclusively looking at locally generated property tax funds. It's like, let's talk about that conversation in the context of all these other funds that we're grabbing from other sources that we're using. I think that's an appropriate way to have these conversations. It's not, I don't know, we want to do the same things that you're talking about and Liz is talking about going forward. We think that's the most appropriate way to operate, and we kind of just want to move in that direction.
And we've actually moved people already from 207 into the operating fund.
Okay.
And I've actually stopped anybody from this point forward going into 207. Okay. So that is a goal. I'll need some guidance from the board at some point to how we're going to bring that to where it needs to be. That's going to be a path.
And Byron's going to wrap us up on this.
Okay. Hopefully this question can go. So the question I have then is, say we're in a position where you are trying to look for people based on like the budget discussion, and some of those people aren't visible. Like, what is the
So,
how do we even reason about?
well, that's going to be interesting, and I think we're there's eventually a conversation that's going to happen as part of the city process. I think as we're having that dialogue about, these are. I mean, I think the city's not unaware that those people are here, and we've been funding them through these other sources. But it won't look good on a city summary sheet compared to the previous year with X number of people.
We talk about
through-
fees and
so that's going to be a little bit of a funky conversation as we go. But really, the number of people on the ground hasn't changed. The way the impact on the city budget hasn't changed. But we're changing the way, because we're changing the way in which we're allocating those things. It will look like on certain summary sheets problematic.
I think the question I'm more asking is,
Yeah, sorry.
Are you looking at administration as like the entirety of the staff as like a holistic unit?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So this is not. So as we and I can talk. The only other item I had here on our budget really quickly is just to give you a very quick snapshot of what we're doing right now. Outside of these conversations, we're working really hard to put you in positions to have some options in connection to the guidelines coming out of City Council. Some of that is, well, I can just tell you really quickly. I mean, we're exploring kind of coming up with concepts that could be connected to buyouts for people. We're still playing with that, and we're hustling. Well, I'll come back to the speed. We're going back through, again, another round of making some culling back through operating in non-personnel ways to see what else we can scrape out. And then we're in that process of also having those conversations. If layoffs, then what does that look like? And so we've got a bunch of seniority work we have to do right now that has been challenging. Eric and his colleagues have had to fill out surveys on what did you do for the district in the last 3 years as part of a CBA connected thing. I wish that was not part of our CBA. I think it's led to some. It's not a great way to treat employees, and so we're going through that just to be able to identify through a scoring system seniority and make sure we have that correct. And then we're also having conversations with administrators collectively around. Okay, hard conversations about where, if we need to make reductions, where do we make reductions? What are the programmatic impacts if we make those reductions? With trying to incorporate seniority as part of that dialogue. What I can tell you is whether someone lies in 207 or in Fund 11 doesn't make a difference in whether or not they're being considered. I think that's the core of your
That's the
question. But I will tell you too that we're trying to move at a really fast clip, and so my concern is, in retrospect, if this is a conversation we had with the city in September, we would be going through a much more methodical process on the administrative side to try to figure how do we create scenarios that put you in a position to respond to the city council, and that we're doing it in a way that is that really puts an emphasis on being humane to our employees, and thoughtful about the way in which we're approaching our employees, being strategic about how we're thinking about places where we could reduce and move, where we're not just reducing for the sake of reducing, but where we've come up with better, smarter ways to think about how do we still continue to emphasize our strategic initiatives while trying to look at reductions. And all those things are hampered by a timeline that was unanticipated and is very, very fast. So we're trying to balance all those things at the same time. And our goal is to be in a position to have some portion of that in a position to be able to have some dialogue by the next time we meet a week from today. But we are, like I said, we're moving at a really fast clip to try to do that right now, and are having some really challenging conversations on a day-to-day basis. But 207 people, it doesn't matter if you're in 207, you're in a whatever, everybody's in consideration for if we needed to make reductions.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Should we try to, is there any benefit to having Brian move up and doing revenue, or you want to
I would like that if that,
make a motion?
what's it called?
Bend the rule.
I move to suspend the rules to consider 9B, the administrator report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I think that was unanimous. Was it unanimous? Okay. All right. Go ahead, Brian.
Not too much to report as far as anomalies. I always look at the end of January as the midpoint of the year, because think about it, it's really the midpoint of the kids being through the year, since we're not generally in, we have summer school, but we're generally not in school in July and August. So I always look at the end of January as our midpoint. So far, our numbers look good. You'll see some red numbers in there, but they're more than offset by savings in other areas. So we're actually in the black right now. I'm holding back as much as I can to offset any unanticipated special ed expenses. So far, we've actually compared, we did go up from last year, but we're actually doing pretty good. We're pretty steady right now. So I'm not too worried about that. But and on the revenue side, which I think Kerry was alluding to, a lot of our revenue comes in the second half of the year. Reason being is we only bill for tuition twice a year. We bill at the 90-day mark when we hit 90 days of school, and then at the end of the year, because we have to, not everyone goes a full 180 days. If they move in or out of the district, we have to prorate that. And we also have rental fees that come in, our building aid comes in later, our grants are usually a month or so behind. But overall, our revenue is where it should be. I'd like to get some feedback as far as, this revenue report. Again, revenue reports only came out this year. They're required by law now. Is there a way that you would prefer me to break this down a little bit more? I mean, I break it down to general fund, grants, and local revenue, and food service revenue. If there's a different way you'd like me to do it, I'm more than open to it. Every board is different on what they want to see, so that's really up to you.
All right. Any questions for Brian? Kerry?
So I guess first question, why aren't we including known income into our budget more directly, i.e. little clipper fees or things that are going to one budget whatever.
If it's operating fund, yes, we should. But when it comes to the separate funds that are self-funded, they actually don't fall under the school board because they're not, it doesn't go to taxation. School board actually oversees funds that go to taxation. So that would include food service, that would include little things like the little clippers. We have a fund for the drama because drama brings in money through ticket sales, but there are expenses that we pay out of that fund. So it never goes to taxation. They basically self-fund themselves, which is very good.
So I guess that would actually be my suggestion for organization is like Title 1A goes to specific things, but it's personnel. Like that, I don't.
It's not all personnel. I mean,
Right. I guess more, if things are connected to a specific like self-funded mechanism, having those appear separately, then the grant local, those are my 2 cents. But my other question, and this was sort of the question about the change or the unpredictability. But so 3230, the sped cat aid state. So that's almost double what we had anticipated. And so like, if, for example, why? and is that something we should be?
your sped aid is always a year behind. It's
Okay.
when we put in for reimbursements last year. Last year we had unexpected reimbursements, like we had people really high special ed costs, and that gets reimbursed by the state. Now, at the time, we figured it would be, we always under budget on revenue, because the problem is if you over budget on revenue, you come in short, it goes the other way. Now you have a deficit. And then I have to go to city council and say, oh, by the way, I'm out of money, and nobody wants to do that. I never want to do that. So at the end of the year, that ends up offsetting anything that's over in the budget, or it goes, we end up like, one of the things is like Kenny was saying, do we have anything we can knock off the list on the CIP of stuff we need to do? Or do we have anything that we need to do in one of the schools to you know, that they've been wanting to do for years and they can't? Maybe we have an extra 20,000 here, 30,000 there, and be able to do that. So there's different ways of happening, but there also is revenues that come in short. There's some revenues that just won't come in at what's budgeted, and we have some revenues that are budgeted zero, and we have maybe $5,000 that'll come in. I mean, it's a balancing act. Do it every year.
I think that number just really caught me because, I mean, if we're talking about layoffs and we have 400,000 extra in income, like that's positions. And
But that's just 1 year.
Right.
And so is that, I guess that's the thing is the anticipated, the revenue budget, what is that based on?
It's based on estimated revenues at the beginning of this, when we're actually, right now, I'm putting together a list of our estimated budgets for FY26, or estimated revenue for FY26. There's so many, I'm doing the math on, trying to gauge where we're going to be for SAU 50 tuition, or our CAT aid's going to be. I'm working with special ed to find out, what have we put in so far this year? Where are we trending? And what do you think you're going to get reimbursed? Because we put in last year, or the year before, I think, because they're a year behind, we put in $2.3 million to get reimbursed, and we got reimbursed like $865. So you're almost guessing on what you're going to get. And every year, the state will change it, or they'll say, by the way, we're out of money, so we're only going to give you 66% of what you put in, which is what happened this year. And then it's not as easy. Revenues are much harder to estimate than expenses. Expenses, you have all types of trends, but when you're getting your money from the government, it's always tough to guesstimate that.
Liz.
I understand it's the school board's purview to oversee what taxpayers are paying and budgeting for and whatnot, but I don't understand this concept of the school board can only see what would hit tax revenue. I mean, I don't understand how a school board can oversee a budget but not know all the revenue streams and whatnot. So, I mean, if that's what you're going to point to, great, and that might be exactly what it is, but I'd like to see, like, if somebody could give me an RSA or a city charter or something or other that says that, great, I think. But my understanding of the school board is that we oversee the budget, and how are we supposed to fully understand the budget if we don't understand all revenue streams, everything coming in and out? And I think, to Carrie's point, this has been an expressed concern that citizens have called in and expressed about too, of, like, you know, I mentioned, like, the parking fees last time. You know, with the high school, there's parking fees that come in. Where does that go? So there's sort of questions about where these, and I think that's just a general, for the citizens of Portsmouth too, a general idea of, you know, open government, of seeing where money's coming in and where it's going. And so I guess, you know, when I was looking at this, I see student lunch and I see $21 for this quarter, $89 for the year, but how do you factor in the fact that I'm paying $4 a meal for my son's lunch? Does that not show up here? Assuming it's not, because we only have $21, but how does that factor in? Are we only talking about state assistance in this revenue report?
Nope.
Okay.
No, you have to look at the total. The total is on the far right.
Yeah, total is $89 for student lunch.
Right. But then you keep
So
going
I pay
down.
$4 a day, so I'm pretty sure.
Keep going down
I've
for
paid-
student prepayments, student online payments. You have
Okay.
$300,000 of online payments.
Okay, so that's, all right, that's where we're going.
Right.
Okay,
And by the way, on the transportation, if you go to 195 on the first line, you'll see your reimbursement from the high school for the permit. The
where is that?
permits.
I'm sorry.
195,
People
transportation,
transportation.
top right, first line in. You see we get actually two sources of revenue there. One of them is the permit sales from the high school, and the second one, the city actually gives us a share of their parking income. It's $50,000, and that's in there.
Hold on, what number line is this?
It is cost center 195.
Oh, you're
In
talking
your
about
budget
the
book.
revenue report right now. You're talking about in the budget.
Just answering the question that you had
Yeah.
about transportation.
And where is the money that comes in here?
195.
Yeah.
Cost center. Your first line on the right, which is this year, proposed budget, you'll see transportation, pupil transportation reimbursement, and you go down to the bottom two lines, you'll see the revenue that comes in.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Anybody on this side? All right, good. Now we move on. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I'm glad we're seeing the revenue. I know it sounds like it's a mandate anyways, but it is very helpful, for sure. All right, staff presentations, 2024 standardized test data. Patty.
So, thank you. I'm going to try to bring a little bit of happiness, light, and celebration into the conversation today, because we all seem to be a little bit in heavy territory right now. And this is just an opportunity for me to share with everybody here the work that all of you are doing as elected members on the school board to impact learning, all the things that we're doing all the time, talking about funding and all these things that are so unfun, and we get to see the fruits of all the work that are going on. And just in the interest of time, I won't pull up the PowerPoint, but you've got the slides in the agenda. But you will see what's presented is by grade level, by tested subjects, so English language arts, math, and science. Science is only tested in grades 5, 8, and again in high school. So you'll see all of that broken out by gender scoring as well as by subgroup. Some of the graphs might look different from grade to grade, like subgroups might be missing. That's only because those subgroups aren't represented, so there was no point in putting a subgroup in with no bars. So you've only got bars for the subgroups that are represented in those grade levels. As you can see, we are doing very well in all areas with a very high percentage of students at or above proficiency, so that's levels 3 and 4. We continue to focus on areas of improvement in the curriculum work that we're doing that's linked to the strategic plan, with the interventions that are going on in the classrooms, our regular instruction, all of that work continues to move and to show progress. What you will see in the booklet that's coming out as part of the budget, the annual report, you will see the 5-year spread of scores, which I did not include in this because I didn't want to confuse information. But that dates back to the 2019 pre-COVID scores. And what you will see is that in just about every area, we are now at or above our pre-COVID scores. So that is a huge, huge feat to have been completed. Thanks to the teachers, the administration, the staff who prepared the students so well to quote, close the gap that folks have been talking about since we had COVID. We're really where we were in 2019. Our staff, our teachers worked tirelessly. They worked diligently to provide our students with instruction and intervention support to achieve at high levels. So it's really to the benefit of our students that these things are happening. And again, it's an outcome of the work that goes on around this table and the dedication that everybody on the board has shown. So just a little bit of good news to sort of bring into the meeting and to remind us of why we're here is we're here for our students and we're here for learning. And as a, self-described nerd, to me, if I could just constantly be learning, I'd be very happy. So it's really good news.
Any questions for Patty? Gary?
Are children with IEPs included in this? Or, and are there reports that differentiate?
So they're not
Efficiency?
they're not broken out by a subgroup in this, but the IEPs and the case managers do track that growth as well. And so they're included in here, and they're not necessarily in level 1 or 2. They could be showing up in level 3 and 4. So we don't break them out as a separate subgroup, but they are tracked.
Thank you.
Liz?
Could you just help me understand the graphs a little better? I'm just looking at the last graph, for example. It's science grade 8.
Yep.
There's 100 level 1 black male students.
It's 100%.
Okay.
It's
But then
percentage.
the percentages don't add up. Like it's, then we got level, like Hispanic, this is supposed to equal 100?
So
Under each group.
So keep in mind, though, that there's 2 or more races that can be chosen. For the subgroups, it's not always going to equal out to 100%.
Okay.
Because there could be subgroups, you can choose race, you can also choose whether or not you have an IEP or student with disability. So you might show up in a few of those as a student. You're not just going to be showing up once on one bar. So you could be a Hispanic student who is also an English language learner, EL. You could be somebody who is 2 or more races and an English language learner. So you could show up in more than one of those categories.
But they,
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying the Hispanic one I think is what threw me off because it's not, I think it's over by 1. But so then when we're looking at the genders though, those are the actual number of students.
It's percentage of students scoring there.
So we get 102%. Like I guess I just don't understand
Just how statistical rounding happens in reports.
51. Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess that's just confusing to me to get a clear picture of our students there. Like, I guess could you explain the science graph, grade 8,
Which
scores
one?
by gender?
Last page.
Second to last page.
Yep. So in level 1 for male, the green bar, 28% of them scored level 1. 22% of all the females who took the test in grade 8 scored at a level 1. It's not a number of students, it's a percentage of the
Do you
students. who
understand
spoke.
how I'm confused here? Because you got 51 plus 18 plus 32 plus 28, 22.
So your 51
3
is
and
adds
4 is about
together,
proficiency.
your 51 is adding together the
Okay.
level 3 and 4. So that last column is already a combination.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, if that was broken out, I think because a lot of people want a quick snapshot of our students who are proficient or above proficient.
Right.
How are they doing? And so I think it's a little bit confused. I understand the confusion, but just think of that as a separate break off. And
Because really, when the state looks at when the state has to designate schools that are in need of improvement or districts in need of improvement, they're looking at that last bar. If you're not hitting above proficiency, level 3 or above, if you've got a higher percentage in the levels 1 and 2, you are a school or a district in need of improvement.
Okay,
And
got
so
it.
the state spits it out as, okay, if this bar is below this magic number, we've got issues.
Okay.
We don't have those issues here.
And do we do anything, like I know like in middle school, for example, there's the STAR testing. Is there anything that's done with the state testing or the STAR testing when you have a kid that's, I mean, I understand if a kid's hitting 1 or 2, there's maybe an IEP or 504 or something involved or interventions, right? But are we doing anything when we have a kid that's hitting level 4 and 99% in an area?
We have other enrichment opportunities for them, then those are based on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
And-
Is there a way to get, like, is there a way to rate? I understand the state, like, you know, for example, Maine has, you know, they recognize giftedness, so there's funds there, right? There's not necessarily funds to recognize a kid that's scoring 99%. But if we don't recognize that kid that's scoring 99%, we start to lose the kid. And is my concern, because I think I was one of those kids, and I worry, you know, for the future generation, and maybe my own son, of losing him when he's hitting 99%. So I guess I'm curious, and maybe I just say that to kind of bring awareness to it of like, hey, could we, you know, now that we've kind of come out of this hump of COVID and trying to fix everything, could we start doing some programs and services extra to hit those kids? And I think in the past, maybe we have. I don't know if we are as much anymore.
So when we talk intervention, and I think too, this goes to your point, Liz, about being like in that COVID mentality of like being behind.
Yeah.
Intervention is also to push forward, because you're intervening where a student is either in need of something more or in need of a boost. So that's a different way to look at intervention.
Okay.
But those are things that we are factoring in, and as we continue to work through the work that we're doing with the strategic planning in the curriculum areas, that's an area that we are focused on.
Okay.
Because if you think back to when we wrote the strategic plan and those 4 questions, what do we want our students to know and be able to do? How are we going to know that they've learned it? And then the third question is, what are we going to know if they don't? So that's what we're used to. And the fourth question is, what are we going to do if they already know it? So those are the pieces that, as we continue to work on the curriculum and instruction components, we build in those opportunities as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Lisa?
Can I just follow up on that? I'm curious with English, what is happening? Because we have honors track and we have acceleration tracks for lots of other subjects, but not for ELA. So I'm curious what the options are for the students that are in that 99 percentile in ELA.
And that's something we can bring back to
Yeah,
the
I'm
high
just making a
school
note
and,
for-
yep,
Yep.
and get that from them. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Patty?
I just have a follow-up. You said that kids with IEPs were not broken out, but
They are. I misspoke.
okay.
Yeah, they are.
On certain things, it looks like.
Yeah, and some of them. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that right.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right, yeah, thank you. It's good to see that.
Good news.
I mean, overall, it's it's tough that everybody went through that dip, but it's great to see that, you know, the teachers have obviously worked really hard with the kids. The kids have obviously worked really hard, and I know my kids were affected directly, and probably most everybody here had issues too with COVID. So it's glad to see that we're kind of healing, at least from academic point of view. So that's great.
It's contrary to the national trend, which I think is
Right.
Notable, right?
Which does come back to some of our funding conversation
Yep.
Yeah.
and conversation about the fact that these are schools that are succeeding in places where other school systems are not.
Yep.
Right.
And so to the idea of cutting, you know, in the teens of the professionals who are doing the work, who have led to the success that overcomes the national trends, is just a cost that just should be very, very deeply considered prior to making that choice. and it has to be weighed, because again, if we are breaking the trend, that's happening due to the folks who work for us, who are really good at what they do. Also, as we want to recruit and retain the best folks, part of what has helped us in the past is when folks come in, they say they're coming to Portsmouth because they know it's stable. Mm-hmm. And they can trust that they've worked in their career to get to a point where they can come into Portsmouth, and that there's less concern about the ebb and flow of a year-to-year budget cycle that they could be going through. Every other year they have to worry about whether or not they have a job. That's something we hear folks who are previous department heads in other districts. They are like the all-star person from the places they're coming from, and they're coming to us. And part of why they're coming to us is around stability, is to be a part of what we're doing, but also that feeling that the reputation of Portsmouth is that large-scale types of layoff type of situations are not part of the makeup of what we are as an organization. So these are all, as we're having these conversations, even now, as we're just talking about these things, never mind what we decide, staff are recalculating to what extent that continues to be true, and to what extent they should be thinking about other opportunities as we come out of February and we get into March, where the early part of the hiring season will start. We're already going to be there. So I know you guys know all this stuff. This is as much as anything for the general public to understand that the success Patty talked about is not something that just is going to happen no matter what. And I just want us to be cognizant of that, and the community to be cognizant of that, while being super respectful of the impact reevaluation has done to people's actual pockets at the same time. So anyways, just wanted to say that.
For sure. Thanks. Superintendent's report. Zach?
So we've had some. I've mentioned a couple times about some of the work that we were doing in relation to immigrations and custom enforcement, and having broadly we're talking to staff, and then we got into more specificity through Wadley Star and their work that they were doing on behalf of us and then some other school districts. I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity and the public had an opportunity to see transparently what we are advising staff. They need to do, whether you are a custodian or most likely what we're going to be talking is, it's like if you're a front desk, if you're the person who works the front desk, what do you need to do specifically? And if you are a principal, then what do you need to do? And I think the overarching stuff is the same as what I told you before. Our goal is to follow the law. And to support all of our families, regardless of immigration status, which, by the way, is following the law. That's not an activist, radical position. The expectation for us under the law is that we will take all residents of Portsmouth and the surrounding communities in. The checking of immigration status is not something that schools do. We're not under federal law. So we are going to be super respectful of federal law enforcement as they're carrying out their duties. If that happens happens in conjunction with our spaces, but as I said before at a previous board meeting, our expectation would be that those activities would be carried out in a lawful way, which we would expect. We don't have any reason to believe wouldn't be the case. But the big message remains as well, that we also we see our families who are in our systems, regardless of when they came to our country, as a core important part of our school community. We are there to support those families, and I want to make sure that those folks hear that from us, and simultaneously that we think we can do all that in a way that is absolutely legal and absolutely responsible in terms of our other obligations. So I don't know if there's any questions for anybody in regards to that.
Pip.
First, thank you for sharing this. It's really helpful to know that you're on top of it and that everybody can understand what the protocol is. I noticed there's a lot of there's notation that we don't have, or that we wouldn't share students' immigration status, but it doesn't say the same about staff. So I'm just curious how that's handled. And
So as part of an employment process, folks have to go through, so we're aware of those things. I don't think we're in a position, I think Wadley had framed this around believing that we were not in a position based on the normal hiring practices that we would be in a spot that would be a concern. So I don't think that we are. And so all of this is framed around kind of the student population and not staff, because I don't think the perception was that we would not have an issue in that regard.
is that true for volunteers as well?
I can find out. I can find out because we would do a background check, but we're not going through.
Well, for designated, because again, volunteers
designated,
gets tricky.
right, for designated
Because we've got
volunteers.
two pretty much categories of volunteers.
Good
And I
point.
think I've made this analogy before, but you've got the volunteer that goes once a year on the field trip to the apple orchard.
Yeah.
We don't know about that person, but the people who are the designated volunteers who are coming in every Wednesday to shelve books in the library, they would go through a background check, and so we'd get more information about them. So it gets, with the adults, I think, especially volunteers, it's what are we talking about, which category? And then it's, I think folks are thinking more about from the student perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
But I
you.
can definitely follow up to really drill down on that question and get back to folks.
Yeah. Okay. I just want us to be ready for anything.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pam. Liz?
I also appreciate the protocol. It just really got me thinking, though, about, we have this protocol for ICE, which I don't know if it's going to necessarily happen in Portsmouth, but we do have other situations where people are requesting records, like DCYF, and providing records to DCYF. I don't know that we have any protocol for that. And I know that there was a recent form that we just established at the last meeting or voted on the policy for that. But it kind of got me thinking about, there are other actors coming in requesting student records that the schools are providing student records to, and I don't know if we necessarily have a protocol for that. Then my next piece of that, though, too, is, speaking from experience, as an attorney that was working with families that would sometimes deal with IEPs or whatnot, before I was on school board, I tried to access or obtain records for a client, her child's records, and I was jumping through hoops at one school where another school, elementary school, had a form to get your students' records or to request that. And so I guess I'm wondering if that's a form across districts. So maybe less about wondering, but maybe more to throw it out there that this is great to have this protocol should it happen. I assume in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, it's probably maybe not going to come up, but there's these other situations that are happening on a regular basis that we probably should have protocols for too.
So I'd say first, in most of those other situations, part of us creating a protocol for this is the possibility of precisely so we're talking about putting staff in a position where these are things they've never contemplated in their careers.
Yeah.
If I maybe Eric would have been all over it, but if I gave him 2 months ago the "What do you do if ICE comes?" quiz,
Yeah.
I'm assuming I wouldn't have been in a position to answer that question.
I'm going to be honest with you, that they didn't know what to do when an attorney called and requested a child's records on behalf of a client in a release form for those records or whatever release they needed. So, this was 5 years ago maybe, so maybe things have gotten better, but I'm just throwing out there that I think there may need to be protocols in other areas too.
I think some of the stuff is just we don't have a written protocol per se, but people just know because we've done it a bunch.
Yeah, and
it's
I
just
think a
normal.
written protocol may be beneficial, or at least a form, because one elementary school had a form, other elementary schools didn't. I think it was New Franklin because they probably dealt with it more. But yeah, anyways, just throwing that out there, and I do appreciate it.
It's all available online.
I don't see him anymore.
Yeah, so we have. Anyways,
There's
we'll
a
track it
form,
down. We
yeah.
have a form that we're sharing with schools around FERPA-based.
And it's part
Requests.
of policy JRA too.
Yeah,
about
I saw the
FERPA.
policy, but not any forms right now.
Any more, Lisa?
Yeah, I just would say I really appreciate you taking the time to communicate this to our staff, and I think it's really important for us to make clear to students that they are all welcome and can keep coming to school. One piece that I'm curious about, whether you've contemplated or is on your bingo card for the future, unfortunately, is what happens if parents or family members get picked up, because
Yeah.
that in other districts has been an issue.
Yep.
Where they don't come into the school, but you don't have anywhere to send the child home at the end of the day.
Right.
And we hope this doesn't happen, but I would also hate to further exacerbate that circumstance by not having a plan for how
Right.
to keep those families in some way connected.
I think we're cognizant of the question. We are definitely cognizant
No, I
of
mean,
the
it's
question.
something we shouldn't have to
And we've
think
had
about,
that,
but-
and we've had some of those conversations about where we have talked about as a team the idea that that's maybe the more likely scenario, is that we've got a student who gets dropped off, and then we somehow become aware that there's nobody at home for that student as a result of what has occurred. I think in the immediate aftermath, there'd be a combination of conversation with DCYF and with immigration around what's happening, and then right now we would ad hoc be trying to figure out ways to support that student through that process. But part of what's challenging right now is not knowing exactly what the backside of things would look like, because it's evolving so fast. And so we're aware of those questions. We're trying to find those answers, and then trying to learn from folks who are in areas with a higher concentration of undocumented students, and what are the systems they've already built that are in place that we might be able to borrow from. But we are aware of the question, and right now, in all honesty, we don't have an answer we're happy with, because a lot of it is beyond the scope of our kind of mission and our ability to control. But we're still having dialogue with folks as we go.
All right. It looks like there was some two field trips and Your summary.
Waiting for Carrie to make a run while Nancy's not here at the field trip stuff.
Can
all right.
All right. And then you have the email summary, and then we're into
Old business. All right. Pip.
Sure. Okay. So we have 3 policies that are back for the second reading. We saw all 3 of them at the last meeting, and there were minimal changes between now and then. Is there perhaps a motion to vote on all of them at once?
Motion to approve all policies on the agenda under old business, EBCH, GBGBA /JLCEA/KFD and JLF.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, is there discussion about any of, well, I'm sorry, let me start with the minimal edits that were made. I think there was discussion,
I think the AED one is great. Love it.
okay, there was discussion of that one in terms of the word employee versus personnel, and it was changed to personnel. And I think that was the only substantive change since the last version you've seen. So are there questions on any of the 3 policies?
I just wanted to make a comment after this. I think in our policy it talks about calling in anonymously, but if these actions go to court, I think the staff needs to know that, so if it goes to court through a 169C case against the parents, that they are no longer anonymous. Even if you call in anonymously, your number is still on there and you still are potentially a witness if it goes to court. So all's anonymous until it becomes a court action. That's a
good point.
And so I think that is, for me, when I was reading it, that's what's missing from the policy. So I don't know if that can be conveyed, if it needs to be in the policy, but may need to be I don't know. I don't want to deter anybody with that, but
Well, my
that's the
understanding was that
reality.
we discourage people from doing it anonymously anyway. Isn't that true? Is that one of the reasons that, I know you said that in
Well,
the,
there, and they will eventually try to end up figuring it out, and I think it's better to put it as you don't want your name to be disclosed, instead of saying I'm calling in anonymously.
Well, non-disclosure though, still, like, you're gonna get disclosed.
Eventually,
Yeah.
but not initially, because if you're calling in something that maybe turns out to be nothing, it's better to keep the relationship sometimes.
Are you saying that the C anonymous part, that's not correct?
well, it's anonymous initially, but
Well, in
That's what
the
it's saying,
disclosure
if it-
not allowed at prosecuting identifying information in all reports become public record. They're not public record, it's still confidential, so it's actually, so it's not really, the court record in these cases are not public record. So that's not really accurate either. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around these cases, but all child abuse, yeah.
I would just ask though, and I've only been involved with a few, but is it the case? Isn't it pretty rare for a caller to be subpoenaed? Isn't it usually as part of the broader investigation?
No.
It's usually the initial report.
Whoever does the intake, I have them. If I were to bring it in a 169C case, the person that did the intake would be the one testifying to the intake, unless the rules tend to be pretty lenient, and I try to in my past life, I would try to make these cases as less messy as possible and not bring a bunch of people in, but the person doing the intake is your best witness because that's the one that started the whole investigation. So I don't know. I think this is fine. You have at prosecution identifying information in all reports become public record. Maybe that's the inaccurate piece. These cases aren't public record. They're highly confidential. Good luck to anybody outside of the school department trying to get, an abuse and neglect name on the list of perpetrators, because even a ball coach isn't searched within the system for abuse and neglect. Unfortunately, our system is not great when it comes to protecting children in that way. So these are not necessarily public record. They are still highly confidential cases. Any of my family cases that have DCYF involvement is a sealed case. It's all confidential. So I guess I think how you have it written is fine. And maybe just the fact that it is actually not public record. I mean, it is a record, but it's not. It's still highly confidential. So either way, I think this is fine to move forward with, but I do think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what these cases look like and what's confidential and what's not.
any other questions there?
okay. We'll move it to a vote, I guess. All those in favor of passing or approving the three policies in old business?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
All right, thank you. New business. So administration's worked on the school board calendar for 2025-26. We did have one thing in there, right, Zach? We had like a Wednesday we were shoved in there or something.
There was I think we were up against Veterans Day.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so we would move off of Veterans Day to the 12th under this proposal.
Go ahead, Liz.
I'm gonna renew my request for the a summer month off, just like the lovely Hanover School Department that Nathan brought the high school to. That's who I took the lead from when I requested it before. We got a summer month off. So I understand, things are busy, but I do feel like July 8th, right after the 4th of July holiday is maybe not well attended potentially. And so I do wonder about whether if we could potentially take the summer off. I think it was a good reset.
Yeah, another thing to think about is the retreat. Usually have a retreat in the summer too, and thinking about where that would fit.
Yeah.
Nancy mentioned that that we might do the retreat earlier, like in the spring this year.
She did mention that. I don't think it went further than that.
I'm wondering if you all looked at the 18th of November instead of the Wednesday, that would be the following week.
Is the 18th, I think we're trying to preserve, I don't know, is the 18th up against the Thanksgiving?
No,
No.
it's the week after.
Okay.
It gets clunky. November this year is weird, the way it's set up.
It seems like it would still fall pretty evenly between the other two meetings. But
Yeah, I would prefer to keep the Tuesdays just because kid care.
I also think September the 23rd meeting's on Rosh Hashanah. I don't know if that was considered.
Which day?
Oh,
Sorry.
geez,
September 23rd.
that's not good.
I would also like to add placeholders in January for the budget meetings.
Say that again?
I'd like to add placeholders in January for the,
Yeah.
Just to have it there, since we know it's going to be there anyways.
it was very confusing as a new board member to not have those on this calendar and then be expected to jump into a meeting before it was even.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And do we need to have a meeting on the 6th of January since that's the first Tuesday of the month so that, like, if there's committees or whatever, we could get, because there's going to be a reorganization at that point too.
Well, one of the things we talked about with this is you can add, so part of what is good about this is you're also locking in with the city clerk space. Now, what we are moving towards a time where we think kind of if this is the A week where we're in here, that we maybe, as we continue to enhance what's going on in the school board conference room, where we'd be able to basically, we'd always be able to use the school board conference room, and that would have the same kind of accoutrements of what's going on in conference room A. So the B weeks become less important. The A weeks still would be, still it's like we only have certain times where we're able to be here in the chambers.
Yeah. I mean, likely we would have a meeting right January 6th.
Yeah, so
I would assume would be a reorg. Most likely there would be some type of short reorganizational meeting. The only reorg was the agenda. That was it.
previously we did that and budget meeting starting that first week in January.
Yeah.
So I know that this year was different, but, so I guess I'd add the 6th and the 20th.
All right. Any other comments? Yeah.
I'd like to vote to not have
Hold on
July
one second.
8th.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. So I was going to ask if we could move the 23rd of September. And I know Nancy did mention at some point doing the retreat during the school year. I think in terms of everybody's schedules in the summer, I think we have struggled mightily to find retreat dates in the summer when every single person can attend. And I think if we could pick even a Tuesday during the school year when people might have an easier time getting childcare and it's not our regular meeting night, that would be something I wonder if we can explore.
Yep.
You know, with all the concerts and all the other graduations and everything else in the spring, I'm sure it'll be really easy to find a free date, but,
No problem.
you know, if it's possible.
Does the 30th work of September instead? Because there's another Tuesday.
Yom Kippar's not till October.
Why don't we do it like after the new board is on, like closer to like April or like more spring? Is that where we're going? Like,
Well, this year we're talking about.
yeah. Or, okay. This year we need one. Okay.
And I think I would just like to see for planning purposes if we can try to figure it out and then just put it on there before everybody books all of their plans.
I've already half booked my summer at this point.
I know.
Okay. All right. If there's anything else you guys think of, please email Nancy and I and Zach. Make sure we get, if you see anything else on there that needs to be adjusted.
So we'll bring back a draft that includes January 6th, that's some type, maybe just even listed as a reorganizational meeting. The other days that we anticipate would be budget meetings in January.
Placeholders, yep.
Yep. And okay, and then
Changes to
And
November and September.
September 23rd.
September 23rd change. Yep.
Could we do July 15th instead of the 8th? I just feel like that's with the 4th of July on a Friday.
I think there was some conversation about whether or not we put July, and I'm trying to remember as we were talking about it, whether or not we had the July 8th date, like, let's put something on the calendar, and that would be the retreat date potentially.
Okay.
I'm trying to recall, and I don't know if you recall.
We
Brian,
did,
but
that was the
it's like,
original.
if you put it on there right now, then
Yeah.
what's our ability to just say, like, let's
That's a
lock it in?
retreat.
But I also understand how close that is to the fourth holiday, and
Yeah.
a lot of people take that week as one of their, summer has started weeks.
All right, yeah, if there's anything else on there, or if you guys have ideas on the retreat, just email Nancy and I, and we'll go from there. All right? Where are we at here?
Hockey.
Hockey. Brian.
We have been approached by the Sanborn School District. Their high school cooperative hockey team has folded, and they've asked to join ours. We're currently with our boys ice hockey. Currently, is a cooperative team with Newmarket. Sanborn would like to join. They have about 6 or 7 players that they could bring to us that would actually greatly enhance our roster as far as more kids to play, less switching on the ice, and probably be less tired. ADs have all spoken, they're in agreement. We do need to get an approval from the board because the NHIAA is meeting, I believe, in the next week or so to actually put this through the approval process. So we currently have very successful co-ops already in place. Obviously, our biggest one is football with Oyster River. We also have cheerleading with Oyster River, and our girls hockey also is with Oyster River. Oyster River actually sponsors the girls ice hockey. We sponsor this ice hockey team, so I would ask for a
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any other questions or discussion?
I just want to clarify, when you say enhance our rosters, in terms of numbers, or we're going to pick
numbers.
Or we're picking up a bunch of ringers, and
I don't know if there's any Wayne Gretzky's coming up or anything like that. But
Tuukka Rask in the wings.
I heard Sanborn imports Canadians.
I would just recommend that we change the school board chairman to school board chairperson.
person. Yep, I think that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Nancy wouldn't like that. Go ahead.
I would just take this opportunity to suggest that we all get creative here and try to figure out an ice rink for the high school boys team. It's something that's in the rec committee or the rec board, and it's really just year after year has kind of fallen flat. So if we could get creative and get some sort of rink for our high school kids, I think that would be super beneficial, versus trying to make a mega complex for the city. Like, even to have something for the hockey team so that they're not going to Phillips Exeter at 9:00 at night to practice would be beneficial, even if it's only in cold weather and they throw in some gear and go outside. So, my aunt and uncle lived there when I was younger, and they made a little ice rink in the backyard. I don't think that's going to be what does it for our kids to play games and whatnot, but I think it could be a practice opportunity if we could designate some sort of field or do something with it. Maybe would have been a good question for Kenny while he was here, but I just want to throw that out there because I think it's just something that continues to fall flat in the city, and our boys and girls, if there are girls on the team, are practicing at 9:00, 10:00 at night because that's the only time they can get rink space, and they're going to Phillips Exeter. So as of right now, as far as I know. So, I mean, that's a lot to ask of kids.
I just don't think it changes because as a girl who grew up playing hockey, like that was always the ice time that was cheapest.
Yeah,
and so
but other
only
towns are
paid
not
teams,
having to do that.
But even if they own the rink, they make the decision to rent the 5 and 6 and 7 o'clock spots to the highest paying. So I don't know. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think that's the
it's part of
struggle,
the-
even if we
Let's
got
focus
this.
on this vote.
Yeah, well, I think that's the struggle, though. Even with a mega complex, if the city farmed it out to
But we're
somebody
not
else.
doing this as a school board.
All right, guys.
No, I know, but I'm asking that everybody continue to keep it on the,
For sure.
not in
Maybe
the
it's
front of
something
their
that you
mind.
could bring to the facilities committee when it gets up and
Yeah,
There you go.
Are you the head of that?
running.
Okay.
All right, let's vote on this, guys.
The girl can
All right, all in favor?
Hi.
Unanimous. All right. Thank you, guys. Committees, it looks like we have, it's in the packet for Policy Committee, Redistricting Committee, and Sustainable Practices Committee, so the notes are in there. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that, but all the, go ahead. No notes?
No, I just had a quick comment. The legislative committee met.
Okay.
The minutes will probably show up in the next board meeting packet. And like last year, the New Hampshire School Board Association is creating a custom tracker of bills that are along the 4 main buckets of legislation that our board wants to track. And so I'm going to be emailing out that custom tracker to everybody on the board tomorrow. I just received that today. And there's a lot this year that could have really, really big financial and curriculum impacts for our school district in a lot of kind of wild and unpredictable directions. So I would encourage people to look at it. And if there's any bills that people feel particularly strongly that we should consider taking positions on in the committee, to just shoot me an email. You don't have to write a long essay, just say, please look at bill number 123, and then we'll add it to our list.
Did you say you're going to email like an initial?
Yeah, I have a tracker of about 50 bills. I mean, NHSBA is tracking about 400. We tried really hard to get it down to a top 10 and failed because there's just so much happening. So if anybody has other things that they want us to look at or things they feel particularly strongly about, they should just let us know. And we'll be bringing it back to the board probably for vote in April.
Awesome, thank
Sounds
you.
great. I will also mention the superintendent evaluation committee met Friday. The minutes obviously met Friday, so they're not going to get in to this packet, but I don't know, Carrie, if you want to say anything, but we are going to send out an interim evaluation very shortly. Very abbreviated version with just a few questions on it, but the exact questions, there will be samples of the exact questions that were on there before. And when would we say we're going to send that?
Maybe tomorrow? The deadline is next Friday, and so it will go out to all SAU folks. So please, as school board members, complete yours.
So it won't be any surprise questions on there, exact same ones, just a small sample. Should take a few minutes to do.
There's 10.
Thank you.
All right. And then future agenda requests, we do have the Google form. I think Nancy looked at it recently. Wasn't anything new on there, but if there's things that you want to bring back up or put on there, certainly put it on the form, and of course you can email or contact us as well. And I guess I'll reopen. Oh, go ahead.
I just have a question about that Google form, and I think I asked that previously, but there's 10 things on there, and we did address one of them earlier this year, and the other 9 are not on the calendar for the upcoming year so far. So I guess I'm just sort of curious about what the process is, particularly for ones where multiple board members have said they have an interest in those topics, to get them into the calendar.
So I know we've discussed them, and I think we'll just have to revisit them. If there's things that really you feel haven't been addressed over the, I can't think of the specific ones, but we'll. Why don't you make a comment on the form and send us an email, Lisa?
Well, I guess the comment on the form, I feel like I'm trying to think, like the topics were world languages, ADA compliance, outdoor education, cell phone use, unified ed programs, the playgrounds we sort of got to tonight. And I'm not sure what the request about paraprofessionals was about, because I don't recall that one, but those were all the various ones that different people put in.
Yeah, we'll do a refresh on
Okay, I appreciate it, thank you.
I have a related
Then I'll have
question.
Nancy put in comments to say this is what we're going to do. Yeah, okay.
I was actually going to ask the same question that Lisa asked, but related to that, I'm wondering if you two could figure out a way to respond to the request. If it's not going to end up on the agenda, at least let us know that it's
That's
not.
where there's a column in there exactly for that.
So it's just, that's where the response.
Well, everybody wanted to see and
Yeah.
have it public. So
Okay.
if I just
It's
email
just
back
we
and
don't
say,
know when that gets updated, so,
Ah.
like, I
see
don't
what
know.
you're saying.
It's,
Yeah,
I
I
guess
think-
we can just keep checking back, but,
Yeah,
like
no, we
Casey said,
can-
I feel like there were a lot of things that just got lost, and I didn't know what happened to
okay,
them.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
but-
I mean, the idea was to keep it transparent, but yeah, it makes sense. You don't get a notification if
Right.
something's
No, but I
added.
like the idea that it's there, so we can check back to see, I don't know, maybe you guys can just tell us when you've reviewed it, and then we can go and look,
Yeah,
or
well,
something like that.
I'll talk to Nancy about looking through that again, and maybe we'll send out direct responses that at least it was updated.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
All right, let's reopen public comment, and I guess we're going to do online as well. Anybody in the audience want to speak? All right, anybody online?
No one's got hands
I'm
raised,
going to
so.
hit the gavel and close public comment,
Okay.
and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? All right, thanks, everyone.
For 9 minutes. Good job.